Gotta make your job with the roll of money.
Yeah, I don't know if I listen to that.
It's available recorded, if you're right. Honestly, one of the biggest takeaways
You know what I'm scared of, he said.
was, it was.
That's great. You might sound like a good thing.
Like the interplay, margin calculation, how the entire system. There were a lot of just basic one-on-one questions. Talked about this.
I know. We had two of them had been through this program at least. There's more talents at least.
Sure.
When do you do applications for that? Yeah, because I have talked to a couple of members who are, you know, all trying through it. So I'll be in the providers. It's true, because it is.
If there was like one 80 topics that you.
Here, short, like online content things that like people would be like, look, yeah, I'm staying right here. You know, and market evaluation. Yeah. It's something. That's pretty. I think I should agree. I told this one and I went to the once again.
Next perfect world, it's like a swimming session on Wednesday after the lecture, and you immediately shipped off to the UK. Don't get the stuff out of
There's no boot camp for public.
No.
Like that.
Literally, election results get announced, the bus rolls up to your house, gets on and disappear for that.
All right, everybody, let's go ahead and get started. Let's see, so today we're gonna talk about water for recreation and business. Last month, we did water for the environment. Few of you were out because we had to reschedule, but yeah, we had some good conversation, a lot of stuff on like wildfire and impacts on water quality, water availability. And I think one of the things I was reading in homework was just like the huge investments that go into that, especially the post-fire. And so how do we turn that into prevention, like forest health? But yeah, that was interesting conversations. What do you all think about the guest speaker last time? So the leadership challenge speaker, I got some feedback on that as like, y'all, some of you weren't here, but y'all would.
I think the biggest thing for that I took away from her, and not that she wasn't good, my biggest thing to get to from her was don't burn your bridges. Like, don't, I mean, even though, and you're gonna have to work with a lot of different people, agree, disagree, whatever, find something or somehow to do that decently with people. Because it may, down the road, it may help you, or it may pay off for you, or not in that, like, I'm not taking it, getting something out of it, but just, that I think is, that's kind of nice.
Was it valuable? Was it useful information? Was it kind of like, been done that? Meh, okay.
I liked her
Yeah,
and
yeah.
she'd probably be great to work for. But, yeah.
Okay.
Don't challenge at all.
Yeah, it's a leadership skill.
Yeah.
Just a presentation of that. I appreciated that she had a deeper background, like multiple backgrounds, and that was inspiring because I consider myself a generalist and knowing a little bit about everything makes you dangerous, but it's fun, right? So I think that's just a different leadership style. She was inspiring, and that's how most of the leadership had to be. So,
And I did appreciate her comment about taking risks.
yeah.
Okay, so there's some
Mistakes.
okay, value from these
But
things.
I think what we talked about is in here is, again, the compromise, how do you get to the conversations, you know, this side, you're butt heads onto it. She was on opposite ends of a lot of different things or whatever, and she made her way through that, and it just shows you it can be done. I mean, you gotta try it, you gotta work at it, but it can be done, so I thought that was really good from her. I think that's, I mean, so she's done a lot. I mean, it was really impressive, her,
Yeah.
like, what she's done.
Mhm. Okay, yeah, I'm just gonna get some feedback, because, you know, you only have so much time in these classes, want to make sure that our speaker is worthwhile. Anybody go to the Northern Water Symposium? Okay, what's the takeaways there? I've heard a few things. I wasn't there because of our other event, but what else?
I didn't get, I had to leave for that part because we had a team building strategic plan stuff in my department, so 60%.
How's that make y'all feel?
So they,
Yes.
they did the survey in the fall,
Yeah.
and people said they wanted it all. So it's, and there were some reasonable, you know, kind of bold responses of like, you know, 80% or whatnot, but people wanted more.
Right.
I think that was my planner statistical analysis summary.
So I just wrote a letter on it yesterday, actually, Northern, sent it to Brad and others. And those on the string with other water users and managers later, and it's like, you know, I see their model, I hear all of it, but in a year where we still have soil moisture content below average, we got great snowpack and we got stream flow. I'm just confused why you wouldn't deliver water to thirsty areas, at least at the average. And so somebody piped up and said, yeah, but remember, the system, as they like to articulate, is supposed to be on 60% average. I said, yeah, but I just went back yesterday and read through every single year. And you will not believe how infrequent, probably less than 6 times, was actually 60 on the dot. It was a couple of years, was 50, most years. I said, so, hey, that hypothetical conversation is probably not coherent. But number two, more importantly, there's been a shift in who owns it, and you have to be relevant to understand as it shifted to M&I. There just has to be like a change in, so what does that look like for the system? How do we manage that in the system? Because there is this, say what you want, there's just dependency that's on it. And so anyway, that was.
Yeah.
I was perplexed why staff was recommending this. Was at the heart of it, given all the variables.
Yeah.
Yeah, I get it in certain years, it's prudent probably to do that.
Right.
This year, you know.
Yeah. What was there, did they provide like a reasoning as to why?
Why staff do it?
Why is it, yeah, why they want to do 60%?
I think they continue to hang their hat on this assumption that that's how the initial system was designed. And that's where it should, the number 6 should be literally the number
Interesting.
as opposed to the number 7.
7. Uh-huh.
So I just said, let's have an honest conversation. It's really about the Colorado River. So let's have a conversation.
Yeah.
But let's not build this hypothetical model and put it out there only to say, but it's really that over there. It's kind of like the emperor with no clothes. I'm like, yeah, but he's naked over there. It's not about, yeah, but it'll be naked, okay, not about there, you know?
Yeah. Yeah.
It's just fine. It's a robust conversation, but let's have a conversation.
Did you go back in your list?
My attorney stretched out, so no recommendation.
Other thoughts?
Work ahead. Work ahead to do.
Any other takeaways from the Northern Water Symposium?
I really enjoyed the snowpack measurements and the things that they're doing and all that technology on the flights and.
The LiDAR
Yeah,
stuff?
yeah, there, that's really cool to see.
It's really cool.
Yeah, how they're blending those together.
Yeah.
GIS might, we need that information.
Yeah.
We need it later.
Definitely.
I would say that would be probably the only unique part of the whole, something, the rest of it was same thing, same. Yeah, but that was a very interesting and unique presentation.
Yeah. That is interesting how, I mean, there's so many of these conferences and symposiums, especially on the South Platte, and it's like, what is the unique information, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah,
This,
yeah,
and this people update was kind of okay. There were others in the audience, so you have to be careful.
Right.
So the light was on the wall where it's not necessary, but.
yeah, I attended a South Platte Basin Roundtable meeting last night. Has anyone ever been to one of those? Yeah? Anyone else? Yeah? Yeah, I'd never been.
But I was on Zoom.
Oh, were you there last night?
Over Zoom, yeah.
Okay.
It's
Yeah.
like half the session.
Will you go again?
I understand like the historical kind of function, and I'm kind of like, what are they doing now? Why should people participate? And I think they're struggling to have people participating and getting like representatives. And I think they kind of need to like reinvigorate or like redefine like what they're doing, but I don't know if I have the time to do that. But anyway, I was just wondering if other people had
How often do they meet and what?
monthly. It's monthly and it's supposed to be representation from like all counties in the South Platte River Basin and like municipalities. It's like this very complicated process by which municipalities in a county have to like select a municipal representative for all municipalities in the county. Like it's really,
Yeah.
there's some problems.
And it was just like an overview of what's going on, or,
Kind of, yeah,
just talking about their next field trip and.
yeah.
New bills.
They vote on what, they fund, the CWCD funds for the water, supply reserve. Water. I can't remember what it stands for. So they do have some say in like what gets funded. And I think the idea is that they like, that the pie in the sky idea is that they're bringing together all these diverse voices in the South Platte River Basin and they're having discussions on like tricky, you know, water issues and like trying to come to some negotiation and solutions. But, and they used to, you know, they did the basin implementation plans, which feed into the water plan. But yeah, I'm not really, I feel like they're kind of like treading water right now, and I'm not sure where they're going, and I was just wondering if that was my perspective or others as well.
Yeah, I mean, I haven't been since they were working on the water plan.
Right,
Don't know that I'd be helped to go again.
right. I think they need a hard sell on why people need to participate, which is, I'm not clear, so.
Yeah, there's some bright people, hardworking.
Yeah,
I just don't know what. the purpose
I think, I think the idea is valuable.
Oh, huge, yeah.
Yeah. Okay, cool. Just want to get some feedback on that. What else? What else is going on in everyone's neck of the woods? Nick might have some updates that he wants to share.
Do you want?
Nick, it's therapy. You got it.
Safe space.
I feel so bad every time this class turns into Nick therapy. Everything is great and wonderful in Fort Collins, I promise. And also there's a ton of shit going on. Last night we had our work session to reanalyze our water supply rates, the development fees that people buy into whenever they do development and all of that. For backstory, when it was initially presented in August, it was presented as a 300% increase to the fee, which rightfully so had some strong reactions to it. So staff has basically gone through and outright rejected all of the consultant work that was done on it and reanalyzed how they want to value our water portfolio. And initially they were not going to make a recommendation on what that was. things change because things do. And they ended up coming back with a recommendation of just a $3,000 increase instead of like a $100,000 increase. So that seemed to be better received by council. But there's also this weird thing of, did it really achieve what the end goal was of trying to actually declare a value on our water portfolio? Right. And not just do like an inflationary increase, like a cost of living increase, basically. So a lot of robust discussion, which led into a lot of housing discussion, how we're gonna fund that $305 million massive project. When I was telling Karen earlier, it was an interesting takeaway into how much our elected officials don't really seem to understand water in northern Colorado and the insanely complex system itself, just of where water is and how it gets to point A to point B, but how it's funded, how those philosophical conversations of, do our current water users have to pay for our future water users, or do we just predict that there's going to be growth and charge everything on the back of our future water users? And some really danceable. Seeing kind of left going, oh, we should talk more about that. Because there's no real clear answers. So hour and a half, 2 hours. That's the book.
Sometimes admitting it's complicated is the first.
That sounds like an A.
Yeah, I was gonna say,
I think that,
meaning that you have a problem.
I think anybody that runs for any municipality things, they should take this class.
Yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
then we were talking about like, and I think I mentioned this before, but just having some like online free content. It's like, yes, it is a little information about water markets and they get boot camp for fish just include yourself in like, yeah, educate yourself. Yeah.
Everybody.
So the other big thing that's been going on with Cocoa Utilities is, as you heard, a couple months ago, we lost our executive director. 2 weeks after that, we lost our finance director. 2 weeks after that, we lost our power director. So that has all led into a complete reorg of utilities. And splitting out the entire reporting structure and redoing all of that. So we're doing a whole lot of what do we want to be when we grow up and how do we keep this train moving? While fundamentally changing the entire internal politics of everything. So
What does that look like? Are you guys just sitting, talking about it all, getting input? How's that?
it looks like our deputy city manager, our city manager, and our overall city finance director getting into a room and saying how we're gonna do this, because the short answer is we're 7 executive directors in 12 years. So clearly that was not working. Something needed to change. So they basically split up the separate utilities, so they're all reporting up to individual people now. Which becomes a challenge from a content marketing perspective, because we still have to work with everybody across all of utilities. So who do you go to for an answer when you need it? And then an outside consultant coming in and doing an organizational assessment and making recommendations from there for at least the support customer service way and going from there. Turns out there is no one set way to run a utility. Or organize it or anything. I mean, there's literally no standard anywhere across the city. Everybody just kind of, or across the country, everybody seems to kind of just make it up and see what works for them. And plus and minuses here in a way, so. Complicated.
Thanks for sharing.
Sure. Thanks for listening. If I call you randomly, I'm like, let's go grab a beer.
And then some shots. No. All right, well, we're gonna go ahead and get started because we got a great lineup today. Excited to have these 2 individuals with us. So we've got Justin Shardy from the city of Greeley, the Natural Areas and Trails Division Manager. He's a dedicated natural resource professional with eclectic professional experience and a strong skill set in a variety of environmental and natural resource management topics, including open space, water rights, volunteer management, research, wildlife management, GIS, and urban nature integration. Justin leads the Natural Areas and Trails team for City of Greeley with primary roles including strategic planning, team oversight and culture building, budget planning and funding development, land conservation efforts, policy and enforcement, capital project development and oversight, community engagement, and advocating and planning for division growth. highly skilled individual.
Wear a lot of hats.
Yes, as many folks that work for municipalities do. So Wade Willis, he is the open space and trails manager for the town of Windsor. And he grew up in Windsor. He's a CSU graduate and worked for the town for over 20 years. He was about 11 years old when he remembers seeing an article in the Greeley Tribune about Cooter Trail to connect to Fort Collins to Greeley. As an avid bicyclist, he was incredibly excited. Wade is involved in many Cooter River efforts, including serving as the past chair of the Cooter Heritage Alliance Board of Directors, a participant in the Cooter Runs Through It Study Action Work Group, and the Coalition for the Cooter River Watershed. He met his wife leading a volunteer effort on the Cooter Trail near the Cooter Learning Center. Welcome, both of you, and I'll let you kick it off here.
Morning, everyone.
To kick it off, just stick to the right and it should, this is what it should go.
Yeah, we're gonna kind of tag team the presentation this morning and we'll probably screw some stuff up and stumble through some things. So thanks in advance for your patience. So, does anybody know where this is at?
No, but I would.
Windsor. Windsor has open space. People, Justin and I go to a lot of open space conferences and people are like, Windsor has open space? It's like, yeah, I have a picture. So this is a single track experience that we created a couple of years ago that we wanted to, make it so people didn't have to drive all the way to the west side of west side of Fort Collins. So some quick stats. You guys probably already know all this information because a lot of your cohort is from these same places, but our current population, according to David here, yesterday told me it's about 632 in Windsor, so we're at 45 today, probably. Exactly. There's a few babies born. We have about 1120 acres of open space. It's kind of more spread out all over the town in very different areas. And then 52 miles of off-street trails.
And really, Will County seat, 49 square miles, 112,000 roughly population. We're slated to build out to roughly 450 over the long term for build out. So a lot of growth to happen yet in Greeley. We currently have about 2,000 acres of natural areas and 30 miles of off-street trails, including 11 miles of the trail at the city, and then we manage the unincorporated Will County portions as well. So just to kind of set the stage a little bit of what we're going to talk about a little bit, obviously there's always a nexus to water in this class, right? But we're going to talk a little bit about conservation, and inherent to managing conservation, and at least in Colorado, is there's always this tug and this kind of Venn diagram that we'll build out here a little bit between conservation and recreation, right? So there's times where folks like Wade and myself will be working on some conservation measures, and maybe that means that people don't get to do as much or certain times a year where people can't access the site and those kinds of things. Conversely, there's time where we give a little bit on the conservation side because, boy, this is a great trail connection right here. It really does kind of impact the wildlife habitats across the river right here, but for the kind of the greater good of the outdoor recreation, we kind of give and take, right? So it's always this dance and this kind of balance. And then certainly over the past number of years, bring in Jedi and obviously justice, equity, diversity, and inclusion, and use whichever version of kind of the acronyms you like. But what we really look at is equitable access to nature, right? So if Wade can jump on his, get in his truck, throw the mountain bike on the back of his truck, and go have a wonderful afternoon because he's got a good job, he has reliable transportation, he has paid time off, those kinds of things. That's all well and good. Well, how are the least able and the least connected folks in our respective communities able to also have that same fundamental right of access to nature and all the benefits that come from it, physically, emotionally, mentally, those kinds of things. So that is kind of a third one that over the past at least decade has really come into play, where we've got conservation, recreation, and the equity piece as well. And then as you start to build all those pieces of it, here's just a handful of examples of what might play into all these different things. So within recreation, you've got user groups that are always kind of pulling at each other, and equestrians want to do this here, kayakers want to do this here. Sometimes those user groups sort of conflict. On the conservation side, we're looking at reintroduction of species, sometimes predators, which if you read the news at all in the wildlife space these days, there are some predators that are very controversial these days. Noxious weeds, water quality, water availability, all those kinds of pieces, and then certainly from the equity piece, environmental justice. So are the most, dumped and impacted and dirty places. They're typically in places where the least resourced folks live in a community, right? So, and then all the other pieces of that, can folks that are not, that need adaptive services, are they able to access your thing? So a lot goes into what we do. Sometimes people just say, oh, you guys get to have a fun job, and we really do, but there's also a lot that really goes into it.
So, all of our decisions, everything that Justin just went over, right? I mean, people are using the trail, helps us decide when and where we're gonna do maintenance practices. And it helps us, identify like how much resources do we need to manage this. So we have several, trail counters. This is specifically the Windsor side. Justin has some on the Greeley side. But at Eastman Park in 2023, we had 154,000, almost 155,000 to go by that trail counter. That's right along the Cooter Trail. Hopefully everybody's been to Eastman Park. If you haven't, you should. Boardwalk Park, that's our crown jewel, Windsor Lake, 101,000. Cooter East, that's kind of lesser developed area, between Greeley and Windsor. We only see about 72,000. That's just east of 257. And then our number 2 ditch trail right behind our recreation center, we only see about 59,000. And it really showcases the different types of usage we see and so on and so forth. And
yeah, and really, we, because our trail system is sort of at a foundational level, but not comprehensive throughout the community right now, a lot of our usage goes through a few trail segments, including obviously the Cooter Trail. So we see upwards of almost 300,000 users coming by the trail counters a year on the kind of western portion of the Cooter Trail. So huge usage of this. Obviously, it's great. We're loving people get out in nature, but also there's the challenges that from infrastructure that come with that as well.
so not only do we use what we actually see to inform our decisions, we get public input, like all of you are probably familiar with. This is from our Park Rec and Culture strategic plan in 2020, I think. And we asked people, where do you want to see your dollars spent for preservation in the town of Windsor, or sorry, for recreation in the town of Windsor? And you can see on the top there, we have river access, a river walk, mountain biking and hiking trails, natural areas, wildlife habitats. People want to be outdoors. That's all they want. And so we've been working to deploy that over the last couple of years. And then, as you all can imagine, Park Rec and Culture strategic plan, that's focused on Parks, Rec and Culture. Of course, we're going to ask questions like that. Here's our strategic plan that Mr. David led here. And we're also seeing from our broader community, our priorities are more trail connectivity to the neighborhoods, more local parks and open space, trees and landscaping, open space conservation along the river. So it's not just our little microcosm, it really is a townwide initiative.
And here's just a snippet from our master plan. So as we're talking about strategic plans and master plans, so in 2021, the city of Greeley did what we call our Get Outdoors Greeley plan. And that was our strategic plan for open space for the next 5 to 10 years. And really, if you look, we worked with a great graphic artist, graphic reporter. If you ever have the need, bring a Benson down to Fort Collins. Her company's called Commerce, and she's amazing. But basically, if you look from left to right, so this is our history, right? So we've got the confluence of the Cooter and the Platte River. We've got agriculture. We've got native peoples and our council tree and so many really cool, just really great, rich history. And then when we start to get into kind of the modern times, and we have very diverse culture in Greeley. Over 40% of our residents speak Spanish. We have a really robust immigrant and refugee population from all over the world. So really a very diverse place. And then when we started talking with the community of what do you like here? What do you need? What are you wanting to see in the future? And then that casts this vision over here into our future. And you can see, everything's bilingual, if not more. We're regularly translating a lot of our work and our public engagement efforts into 3 or 4 and 5 languages in a lot of our public outreach because we have such a robust and diverse community. And then some of our strategic planning goals for the future, and then just really looking at this is what we see in the future where it's not this or that, it's everything together, right? It's robust economic development, it's conservation, it's clean water and available water for the community for a variety of uses. It's agriculture, but maybe it's evolved agriculture into the 21st century and beyond. And then the ability for everyone in the community to connect to nature in all kinds of different ways. So that's really what we try to do in our strategic planning process is really cast this vision of what could be into the future.
I was gonna showcase Windsor's diversity, but it would have been just a white slide.
Yes.
That's not a first. Not a first.
David, you're closer.
Yeah, Windsor resident here, very representative. And then just a brief note on the Trails Master Plan as well. So the last time that really did a Trails Master Plan was 2002, so over 20 years ago. The population of the community was around 85,000 at the time. So, we're approaching 120,000. Growth is continuing at a really robust rate, especially toward the west. So we're looking at, we have 30 miles of trail right now. Our existing trails are in kind of the red color there. And we're looking at over 120 miles to build out a full community, to connect to Windsor, to connect down to Evans, to connect toward Johnstown and Loveland, to connect to Kersey, out to the east. And so really, we've got a lot of work to do. We've got a lot of money to raise and work on that. But really a great opportunity to, the open space is only as good as when people can get to it. So the trail connectivity is a critical resource to be able to have people get out, jump on their bike, take their kids in a stroller, walk to their nearby park, natural area, open space. And we always try to have that within a 10-minute walk. That's always our goal.
And all of those plans, all of those efforts, everything that's been built today, we like to showcase, it's not just these individuals in these communities, it takes a lot of partners. And this is just kind of a smattering of all the resources that it takes to get things in recreation, to promote recreation, to have these wonderful trails along ditches, to, engage with wildlife. We have to work with all of these partners to do what we do. And it's important to always recognize all of them. So going back to Windsor's high desire for recreation, this is a vision that our director, Eric Lucas, created about 3 years ago. And I like to show it because it really is a baseline and casts a vision for our future.
Three national heritage areas in Colorado. Unfortunately, the true beauty of the Cascade is only seen from afar, except for a few locations along the Clear Trail connecting Windsor and Greeley. So the river is inaccessible to the private property. That was change of plan for conservation, health and noise, and in social equity by investing in the river water, by everyone access to our river. 3% of residents believe that our parks and recreation system makes Windsor a more desirable place to live. They rank the following as their top priorities for investment in the future: river access and river walk, walking natural areas, wildlife habitat, boating, canoeing, kayaking, and botanical gardens in the Arboretum. A river walk at Eastman Park will address all of these priorities to recreation and is not for more.
It's Wade playing the guitar.
Yeah. So, up to the next slide. And sorry for that wasn't even from a live stream or anything, but it didn't download very well. So we cast this vision for creating river access over to our Eastman Park site. What we've created is a 1 mile river loop, about a 1 mile river loop that goes down here, comes up here to Eastman Park, and then people can easily walk up to this area. This is the first time in Windsor, really, I think, east of I-25, we've had this access to the river. Go ahead and go to the next one. And so this is the real world view This opened in 2022 to rave reviews. It's been great access, great engagement, great education for people along the river. Go ahead and go to the next one. And now we are working on phase 2, which is on the south side of the river. And this project is actually a partnership with the Northern Integrated Supply Project. They brought us or provided about $2 million to provide a wetland habitat on the south end. So if anybody's familiar with the south side of Eastman Park, we had an earthen dike along this entire border where water had broken through, but it wasn't supposed to because this historically was farmland. We are now bringing water fully up into the site. We can showcase to our community what a healthy wetland riparian habitat looks like. Probably not for 3 to 5 years because it's going to take a while for everything to grow in, but we're very excited, and that's under construction right now. We're anticipating a September, October opening.
And so kind of contrasting that experience a little bit in Windsor, where it's more in town, along some of the great city park or town parks that Windsor has. I want to talk a little bit about a property called Sherview. So Sherview is out on the very far western portion of in Greeley. It's right in between the community separator between Windsor and Greeley. If you've ever driven on Highway 257 between Windsor and Greeley, you drove right through the Sherview property. So the city acquired that property in March of 22. And we've just completed our first phase of the master planning process. So just a really, if anyone's ever been to the missile site park out there in Will County, the Cold War era missile site, that's kind of right now the sort of a jumping off point for this broader property. And so right now there's about 2 miles of trail that folks can use. Really, it's the old oil and gas and ranch roads that the community is using as we work through our master planning process, work on funding development. But you can see here just kind of the conceptual idea of what this will look like in the future. So I think upwards of about 15 miles of trail, everything from paved connections to the Poudre River. Across the river, you can see the Poudre River does come in here for about almost a half a mile into the property. So connections to the river, connections to the Poudre River Trail to the north there. And then a variety of experiences from soft surface, taking a kid out in a stroller, or someone that needs maybe a scooter or wheelchair to be out there to have, we call it the light path out here to get that great nature experience, but in a little more adaptable way. Everything from that end of the spectrum all the way to single track trails for long distance runners, where you want to have a good long hike. And then we'll have a series of mountain bike courses along Highway 257 here. So within, hopefully a couple of summers, as you're driving up here, you might see a mountain bike kind of jump off the hill here and have some really cool things that are hopefully not in the highway, obviously. But there'll be some, and we plan that really strategically because, first of all, to have do bird watching along the highway, that's not a very nice experience, but to have something a little bit more of a that into the spectrum of recreation. And then also we want people to be driving along the highway and say, oh my gosh, what's going on there? Like, I want to take a look at that. So trying to get folks out on the property as well. And just some concepts of what some of the portions of the site could be. So really the Sherview property is almost 1,000 acres. And it will be, it currently is slated to be kind of one of the larger regional hubs in Will County for outdoor recreation. We at Larimer County Department of Natural Resources did a study a couple of years ago, and behind Larimer County residents, Greeley and Evans zip codes were who is visiting the foothills here, right? So we're not replacing the Devil's Backbone or some of the bigger things, but we certainly can provide great regional outdoor recreation with folks that don't have to leave the community. So that's kind of the concept we're looking at there.
Justin and I are constantly building on the backs of our forefathers. One of the most important conservation tools we have are conservation easements. Does anybody know what a conservation easement is? Mm-hmm. Yeah. So back in the 1960s, it would have been the Division of Wildlife at that time, before they became Parks and Wildlife, was able to get a wildlife related activities conservation easement for the Frank property. It's built over the years up to 326 acres. As you can imagine, their original vision of wildlife related activities involved guns. That resulted in a lot of phone calls I would get, once the Pooter Trail went through there. And so Parks and Wildlife has stopped using that, and Windsor's in the process of trying to acquire that easement so that we can still support those wildlife related activities, but maybe instead of a gun, you're going out there with your high powered camera to take some pictures of the area. And I think, you know, so we're hopefully within the next couple of years, all of you have heard the Pooter Trail, we've mentioned it. It's hard to have a conversation about anything without the Pooter Trail coming up. Last year, I said it's gonna be done by the end of 2023. I just left that there because I had to be cheeky. And now when people ask me, they're like, is it really gonna be done? We're dealing with people. One of the things that Justin and I, and all conservation individuals deal with is people, right? These are people that own their own property rights. Fort Collins, in a really great way, I think in a lot of ways, they kind of move forward with this mission of like, we're gonna buy everything right along the river. We're just gonna buy it, and then that way we eliminate those other denominators. Everything east of I-25 did not follow that model. And if it wasn't for the brilliance of the Pooter River Trail Corridor Board, who went out with just, you know, willing partners and said, hey, will you please give us an easement across your property? The trail would not exist all the way from Windsor to Greeley. Fort Collins and Larimer County are now working with the last two holdout property owners, which certainly have a full right to protect their rights of their property and do what they want with that property. But there are those two holdouts. So anytime we say it's going to be completed, it's like assuming that some other variable doesn't pop up. Not to ramble on, but Monday of last week, Fort Collins said, we got a path forward, we're gonna be done by the end of the year. Later that week, we heard somebody found an eagle's nest, so now they have to hold up on construction. And then another issue that popped up, so it's complicated, but we're very close to having a 42 continuous miles. My childhood dream.
And I think it's important also to mention, this conversation with our planning commission yesterday is that, in almost all cases, both from the open space acquisition and trails development acquisition, we always try to work with willing sellers, right? So, you know, certainly we've all had those experiences with eminent domain for roads and other kinds of things. That's really a nuclear option for an open space program. If you do that, you lose a lot of traction in the community. And quite frankly, it's one of the big concerns with an open space, or even on the conservation easement side is, well, the government's gonna come and take my land, right? And so we always really try to message that we respect private property rights. We'll come in and we'll work with willing landowners. And so I think that's what you're seeing in action here is that, you know, Timoth's gonna come in here, Fort Collins gonna come in here and just taking this via eminent domain. That is not really the approach that we want, because then that, you know, down the line, nobody's gonna work with you, right? They're saying, well, come and take my land and give it. So it's something we always try to keep in mind as open space and trails programs. So as Wade started talking about, kind of these broader planning processes. And so the 42 miles that Wade talks about will even be further added to when we go east. And so currently the last couple of pieces between Timnath and Fort Collins there will connect that broader 42 miles of trail. But then right here in downtown Greeley, for anyone's been to Island Grove, we just constructed a really great trailhead there a couple years ago. So if you want to start at the end of the Pooter Trail and go west, or go from the west to the east and in there, it's a great spot to start her in. But we're working with Pooter Trail nonprofit and other partners to continue east all the way out to the confluence of the South Platte and the Pooter River, and then eventually a connection of the South Platte Trail. So you know, really broader visions that we have in the future, and looking multi-jurisdictionally and you know, just looking across the full watershed versus these political boundaries. And I think that's one of the notes on some of the planning processes that happened. So this was the Pooter Greenway plan in 2016 or so. There's been other similar, and when we start to look at these broader planning processes, we look at everything from economic development, safety, outdoor recreation, flood control and mitigation, on and on, right? So this is, when you get into these broader planning processes, we start to look at these things from a much broader perspective. And And with that, and add anything like in there way, but, and with that, one of the things we're looking at is these broader corridors. So as Wade mentions, the city of Fort Collins, Larimer County, that model of purchasing as much land as they could. Now, with the benefit of dedicated open space sales tax, I should mention since the late nineties, to have broader corridors, right? And so that then you have conservation from broader riparian corridors being conserved. You've got great connectivity for and space for the Poudre River Trail. You've got ability to do flood control, flood mitigation, and river resiliency projects, and on and on and on, right? When you have that full corridor, again, because a nonprofit led a lot of these efforts in the construction of the Poudre Trail, there's many sections where we literally have a 30-foot wide easement, and that's the entire width that you have to work in there. Now, so we're going back in, we're working with landowners, we're building relationships to widen those corridors, but that's happening after the fact, and many times because, and I'll show you some pictures here in a minute, because the river has started to move across where the trail is, and when a river moves, then the trail kind of goes away, right? So this is just a snapshot of the Lower Poudre River Recovery and Resilience Master Plan, called the Lower Poudre Plan. And this really focused in on the ecological and restoration opportunities, really focusing in on those kinds of things. And that was led by the Coalition for the Poudre River Watershed, a lot of other stakeholders as well with that.
And just to highlight kind of the transformation you're seeing here. So most places where you engage with the river, you'll see it's just very channelized. It's going to stay in that location. When they talk about river restoration, it's how do we let the river be more of a natural river? And so all of these kind of dotted lines are can we create places where the river can get outside of its normal channel and help regrow some of the cottonwood galleries and some of the create some of the riparian habitat. And I think that's real dumbed down version of what the kind of importance of creating a wider corridor.
The next time you're out along the Poudre River, and you kind of look at where the edge of the riverbank is, see how far the corridor is. So there's literally areas where the river looks like a irrigation ditch, right? There's other areas where you have a broad riparian corridor. We try to shoot for 300 feet, ideally on either side of the riverbank as the buffer of a riparian corridor. Many areas do not have that. So it underscores that these rivers need the width to not only have that space, but these rivers move. They're very dynamic, right? So we just need to give the river the space to do the river thing.
So just not to harp on it real quick, but one of the projects we get to do is go back and work on stuff that others did. And when they placed the trail too close to the river, now we're having to go in and relocate the trail. In Windsor, we've tried to take a different approach and really tried to work with the property owners to move the trail as opposed to armoring the channel, because we don't want to exacerbate that challenge of having a channelized river. And so this is a project that hopefully by this fall will be underway. We're currently working through agreements with the property owners. Quick fun fact, Kodak gave the original easement for the Kodak, or it was a lease for the trail through Kodak. How many years ago?
45.
28, and it's a 30-year lease. So we gotta get a permanent easement out there, so we're working on it. Go ahead. Yeah.
Perfect. So I'll put it a little bit in the same way. We're in a very similar boat, right? So this picture here is from our Poudre Pond site, and whenever ever gone out to that site, gone fishing or gone along the trail there, you can see how close the riverbank is to the trail, right? So this is not our 300-foot ideal buffer that we have, right? Now, what you can't see is right here, there's a giant non-potable reservoir that our water and sewer department uses for return flow obligations in the broader municipal water system, right? And I apologize if I screwed that up, anybody that knows better than me. It's always nerve wracking when the other senior folks can tell how bad I am with some of this stuff. But anyway, the point is, the river, where we typically see these issues is, this is a big outside bend, right? So the river's coming around like this, the energy of the water wants to keep going that way. And when we build trails and other infrastructure right there at these edges, especially when there's not that buffer, you can see here, as you go this way, there is more of a buffer where you've got benches and trees and willows and things that can slow that energy down. the river during flood runoff just hammers these edges. And so this is what you're seeing here. So this was an emergency repair. I think this opened up in 2021. We just went under contract to complete the repair of this broader outside bend. It's almost, I think about a half a mile. There's old cars in there. We hope there's no leaky barrels full of mystery chemicals, but dozens of generations of riprap. And so we're gonna go back in there. This is a great partnership with our water sewer department to really make sure that this is done correctly. We do have to do some armoring in this spot, but trying to also have as much ecological uplift as possible, where we're not just doing another generation of dumping riprap, and further exacerbating river health issues. So this is what happens when you don't, when you have a fixed asset like a trail in an outside bend of the Hood River. So this is the big lesson in my job over the past 5.5 years is, super well intended for 25 years. It got us from point A to point B, but now we have the staffing and the expertise to really work together to know that we don't want to do this anymore. So this is an area, in Greeley, this is in our sheep draw natural area, former alignment of the Hood River Trail, that has obviously been abandoned because the river has taken that area back over. So we work with, when we're going to redo these areas, and I know I'm preaching to the choir here, but we work with a consultant to make sure that we have no rise conditions in there so we don't impact the floodway, impact other landowners. So any of these projects, and sometimes this is a hard discussion with our nonprofit trail partners, is they're like, well, we built this with a guy in a bulldozer 25 years ago, and it's taken you guys 3 years and $300,000 to just model this, right? So it's such a different regulatory environment today, and certainly we want to have best practices, and so we work really closely with our floodplain administrator, both in the city and Weld County, make sure that that we're providing no rise in all of these projects, or if not, we do the columnar process to revise the floodway in this. But when we're dealing with assets right along the river in the floodway, most times interesting dynamics can happen for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. So national heritage areas, they're very important. They're a partner to National Park Service. They bring in federal dollars to the area. You can skip to the next one. So the Cache-la-Poudre National Heritage Area, which I was the board chair for many years, is, we're really trying to tell the story of this corridor and what this story is. Well, the great thing about it, us being related to the National Park Service, is we get some federal dollars, which enables us to do some incredible things, like tell the story of our impact to the region. And so this table on the bottom right is the economic impact report. And I think this is pretty old. I think we need to update this, but it's from like 2018-ish. But you can see the direct and indirect impacts of everything that occurs within that river corridor and what's defined as the Cache-la-Poudre National Heritage Area. And that's basically from the mouth of the canyon all the way through Greeley. And so I just like to, those are some pretty good dollars to showcase the impact of what Justin and I do, and anybody that's involved in conservation. Almost fine. Let's get this one. Must be for a specific project. But I mean, ultimately, the whole point of this is like, we want to tell a story, like, how do we pay for all of this stuff? And so, obviously, we've seen that, or we've shown that our residents love these areas. I think because of the Poudre River Trail Corridor, visions like Shoreview, it has encouraged our communities to support more funds to be allocated for conservation. So in 2022, the town of Windsor put forth a 4% sales tax. It passed by 56%, something like that, thanks to Justin and all his other white friends. But now we have a dedicated fund that we can put towards more conservation.
And just to follow up, so Greeley is looking to Windsor and our other neighbors in the Front Range of how we can also fund open space. So our program is relatively new. We've only been around as a standalone open space and trails program for about 5.5 years. So we're kind of toddlers. We're in the toddler stage. We currently do not have any dedicated open space sales tax. So our city council and our leadership is in discussions right now looking at a few different ballot measures, but one of which being a dedicated open space sales tax. So as far as these types of programs, at least in Colorado, it's different across the country, but in Colorado, the top 20 largest communities all benefit from some sort of either municipal or county open space sales tax, except for three: Pueblo, Grand Junction, and Greeley. So we are trying to move forward and really provide with that 450,000 people that will eventually be really, we want to have this really great community that has a balance of a lot of things, right? Always economic development, great. We know we have great quality and quantity of water. We want to have great roads, affordable living, all those kinds of things. So then the quality of life is really important. And so some of the things we're talking about today is there's always a lot of needs, right? And I'm glad I'm not in some of those elected seats, like my friend here, Deb, that has to make those really tough decisions. But at the end of the day, there's opportunities in open space that once they're gone, they never come back again, right? Once open space is gone, you never can get it back. So that's a lot of the messaging that we're having today. And so like Windsor, we're hoping to either this year or in the next 2 years, move forward with a dedicated open space sales tax. Our current projections, it would bring a 1/4% sales tax would bring in about $7 million a year. So huge opportunities for land acquisition, restoration, trail construction, trail repair, and all the great things that we all need the nuts and bolts of a community, but also that quality of life piece is so important, and that's what an open space and trails program can offer. So that's where we're at in that kind of that big of things. I think that's it. So hopefully we didn't go too far over, but if anybody has any questions or comments, we'd love to chat more.
Thank you guys both. Real quick question for you before my actual question.
Yeah.
Does your acreage numbers that you had for the beginning for both municipalities, open space acreage, does that include the new purchase out by Mr. Butler?
Yes,
It
correct.
does.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Because that was a big one.
It roughly doubled our portfolio overnight, and small acres if you look at compared to a lot of other communities, but yeah, it's been a great acquisition, and it'll be a great anchor out on the west side.
Okay. And then my question for both of you guys, when you're talking about relationships with the private property owners along the corridor of these projects, specifically the Good River Trail, and I guess how do you handle some of the concerns that I might have as a landowner if I were to have an easement or an agreement with you guys? How do you handle things like trash or people who don't respect maybe a fence and their dog gets off trail and gets into the property? Or right now, homelessness is a big issue, and there's been a lot of issues along that corridor with people camping and things like that. How do you guys handle that from the municipality kind of standpoint? Sure.
Great question. And fortunately, right now, our issues are minor enough in Windsor. We have a maintenance technician and a seasonal, and they're on the trail at least twice a week. They're removing trash. We recently deployed a volunteer program called Trail Ambassadors, where these are people that are already out on the trail, but we're just asking them to gather data so that we can determine if we're hitting a threshold. We don't want to get to a point where we're a bad neighbor and that landowner is calling us. But I wanted to kind of capture it on the front. It's just like, oh, geez, Bev was out on the trail today and she saw the same 20 dogs off leash running all over the place. And then we're going to ultimately be going to our town council and be like, we have some violations that are occurring and we don't currently have resources to address them. So we really need to start looking at that. And to be honest with you, I know Greeley has a very different answer on the homeless issues or unhoused. Windsor has not had to deal with that yet. I'm waiting for this gate to open between Timnath and Windsor. I imagine it could get blow up overnight. And I know our police and can't remember, there's another department in our police department are already having those conversations, like what are we gonna do when? So we're looking at it and trying to be prepared, but that's about all we can do at this point.
Yeah, and we have all those issues and then some. So, I think part of it is just building those relationships with landowners when maybe not a crisis day, but years before. We've got a lot of good examples where we, spent years building relationships and when the tough time comes, you can rely back on that relationship a little bit, but certainly all of those issues are prevalent in our system. Probably we've advocated for a couple of budget cycles and have yet to be successful in it, but ranger staff is kind of the next step, because you've got basically what can your maintenance in the field staff handle, and then you've got police department, right? But there's in between there. So does it make sense to bring an officer out for a dog off leash? Almost never, right? Unless somebody's losing it and they're attacking somebody or something, which does happen sometimes. But really that's the in between on the enforcement side. So at the Sherview property that I mentioned yesterday, at the end of the day, I was reviewing, we've got some security cameras out there because we have, our staff is spread all across the city, and it's kind of turned into a dirt bike track. So we're trying to figure out how to catch the folks, educate them that this is not appropriate, and then, include the sheriff's office, because that's an unincorporatable county if we need to. So every site's a little bit different, but certainly the more relationships you can build on the front end are gonna help. But at the end of the day, enforcement from, dogs off leash, trail issues, folks on dirt bikes or other crazy contraptions on the trails, those are really enforcement, issues. On the homeless side, really has taken a really proactive step, and we have in the city manager's office a whole team that's really focused on providing resources, getting out in the community to the homeless folks, making sure that they're safe in the moment, especially in our open spaces. A lot of times during flood season runoff, there's folks under bridges, so we make sure that we do sweeps that we can get them safely out of there those times. And then they work all the way through the spectrum of getting, substance abuse resources, getting back into more stable housing. And then we're working with a pilot, maybe this year or next season, where our homeless team basically said that, if somebody's been homeless for 5 or 10 years, they don't have a resume, right? So they need to get a couple jobs under their belt. So we're working with them on a pilot to have them be some of our seasonals. They can start to build a resume, have a solid job history, so that they can start to continue that spectrum into getting back into the community. So yes.
Just as you're talking about who else involved, has your law enforcement been involved in these conversations?
It relates to the homeless.
Yeah, well, so I have a fun, extracurricular background in outdoor recreation.
Sure, nice.
I go build trails for fun, right? But and I also work for local government, so I know how that works too. But it seems like sometimes if there's an issue in a certain area in a park, people kind of get moved.
Sure.
And they just get moved kind of up the line or down the line, and that's just the way it is.
Sure.
But I don't know if there's any kind of coordination right now, and it sounds like you're trying to provide a solution, instead of kind of moving people around, but, people are still in house, so they, Windsor may eventually have that problem.
Yeah.
So I don't know if, anybody ever includes law enforcement, maybe they do, maybe they don't, it's really just are they normally?
Sure.
Sometimes they're really siloed too, so I know that, and they're overworked in the team, so.
And I provide one example, and then if you want to provide any additional context, but, there's been 2 approaches. And I'll say I have a sliver of a perspective, right? So I don't mean to speak for our law enforcement at all comprehensively, but what we've seen is we work with the neighborhood action team, which is, they do a number of different things in our police department, but one of them that they do is it's a lot of the law enforcement side of the homeless interaction, right? So we work with them pretty extensively, and I will say, 5 years ago, there was a lot more of the kind of, folks going from place to place to place. And we all knew, that was the issue, but they couldn't be in this certain place, so you see them together. But what I see a lot more now is this comprehensive meeting from, the mental health side, the housing side, the law enforcement side, when it needs to be, because sometimes there does need to be a law enforcement side, but it's much more comprehensive look at it now. In contrast, and I'm not trying to editorial, I'm just trying to be factual, last summer, our sheriff's office notified us the day before that they were going to do a sweep of the river. They came through, they moved everybody that was in a camp at that point, and they moved them off. And then we saw those same folks back, mostly the same places a week or 2 later. So again, I'll leave it at that factually, but there has been, I would say, some evolution in some of our law enforcement, certainly in the city side. I think there's different philosophies in the different agencies of how to handle that. So anything that
The city has adopted the housing first model instead of taking the who've been the longest and connecting them with services, case manager, that you put as us 70 people. But it's $4 million out of the general fund base doing this. That's easy.
Right.
Very, very complicated issue, but as it relates to open space, we do see a lot of folks, that end up in our spaces for short or long periods of time. And then sooner or later, when they're not there anymore, whether they move, whether they could provide resources, there's usually a really biohazard trash heap left, a lot of times needles, a lot of, and then you deal with all the issues of personal belongings and how long you have to keep those and those kinds of things. So we will work with CERCPRO a lot, we work with specialty cleaners that can, do some of these things that, so our staff doesn't have to do it.
What would be something that you want your constituents, like your residents, to advocate on behalf of open space? Like, is it something that you want everybody to tell their neighbor that they should vote yes if it comes up on the ballot to like have that tax that goes toward you? Or would it be like sign up to volunteer, or this is how you can participate? Like, what would be something that you feel like would make an actual difference in the work that you're trying to do?
No, you go ahead.
Okay. I mean, we need votes and money. That's what we need, right? It comes down to that. It's really, we do pretty great work with very little resources now. But, as, the Larimer and Will County line being the state demographers, one of our hotspots for growth for the next 30 years, we have to have resources to, it's not a development versus open space thing. It's as development naturally occurs, and hopefully we're doing a good job at that development, that we're also building trails. We're also carving out open spaces and compensating developers at that same time. It's just really symbiotic relationship that it happens. We can't do that right now. So that's what we need. And every year that we don't, we're missing opportunities. So that's what I would say for us. And, we saw all the benefits of widening, connection to nature is important for you personally, for your family, for the community. But I think that's what I would say is that the time is now, and every year we lose, it's just more opportunity to lose.
That's why I wanted you to go first. Windsor's just incredibly lucky, quite honestly. I think, and I hope everybody realizes I speak with them tongue in cheek about kind of how white we are. It's when I talk to Justin and hear about how diverse this community is and how much goes into the planning efforts. And I like that. I'm glad there's that diversity. I feel like our challenge in Windsor is there is so much privilege. And I'm trying to help them understand what open space is and what it's right. So it's really more that education and trying to bring people to the table. Great example. We have a system called C-Click Fix. The complaint was we have these flying bugs all over the trails, and please spray them. They're a nuisance, they're mayflies, but it's important for fish, it's important for that lake, it's important for that river. So it's just education. We're not gonna kill everything because it's bothering you. So anyway, hopefully that answered your question. Good question.
And wait, if I could just piggyback up, I mean, when we just did this, our most recent comprehensive plan, that was our biggest plan, most outreach we've ever done. There was a very definitive line in the stand that they said, we don't want to provide, they said, yes, we want attainable housing. We're not sure if we want to go to affordable housing, but we want housing for our paper bartenders, wait staff, whatever. But that was it. Like, that was as much, non-privileged stuff as they really wanted. Everything else is like, we do not want to provide homeless services. We do not want to provide these things because they see, more common the issues there. They see greatly the issues there. And he said, but they also then see that's where multiple populations gravitate towards because they know that it doesn't operate. So I think there's some concern, like when we connect to more common or different, but we might get some. But I think there's, that may be more transient in nature because we don't have anything in the town for them to stay. So it'll be interesting to see how that works.
Was that the conflict?
We're gonna talk.
It sounds like.
Well, from a communications perspective too, it's a different approach, right? When Wade wants to do education about mayflies, how do we approach that? Like, we also have some people like the LG Sonics that we're gonna be putting into their lake, to deal with algae. Well, do those lasers? Well, there's lasers, but do they kill the fish? You know, what are we gonna do? Is my child gonna have a third eye? We have those questions too, so it makes all of what we do very interesting in that approach. And I joke a little bit, I drive in from Greeley, and I feel like sometimes I drive into a home. It's like, there I am, and it's just a different zone, and it's only a few miles apart.
I drive around the other ones.
You go out the
I go out of the bubble and I go, good, and I will say that perspective, and I'm not saying it's here, but Campbell, and if the resident hat, not, but I think that is a privileged perspective where, you know, last year, there's a homeless person at Eastern Park, there's one, right? It's a privileged, perspective and luxury that we have not had with the homeless. So certainly, you know, I'm proud of what we've done to try it. I mean, you know, there's been a lot of growing pains, but certainly we're trying to take proactively and not just say, well, let's move them. But rather, how do you start to do this? And you look across the country, there is no silver bullet, right? I mean, I don't think anybody has it all figured out. Super expensive, and we have one tiny little, you know, piece of it, but certainly we're happy to be part of trying to do the best we can for those folks.
Let's give it a round. At 10:25, we'll take, 15 minutes here. You guys?
Yeah. Have you left? Yeah, wait part of that.
Thank you so much for the communication.
Yeah, no problem. Yeah, we thought you could do it quickly. I'll be back in it.
Yeah. Maybe next year on the same slide. We get
23, 3 question marks, Matt.
This conversation is really. Yes, that was a good, great conversation. It's like, yeah. That's really clear. Beyond.
That's fine.
And is that all? It must be in here, yeah.
That is such an interesting concept of like, there's 2 major hubs of resources for homeless folks, yeah, and then there's this one in the middle that isn't, so it's that transient space. And like, I wonder how long that can maintain, if it can maintain in perpetuity, that would blow my mind, I'd be surprised. But I mean, I'm curious, yeah, I wonder how long it could maintain that way before like, it's just maybe the other side's overwhelmed and and they just meet in the middle then eventually one day.
Yeah, I don't know, it will be interesting. I know.
Like, imagine that, great to meet you, that's a big one, we could see it. Sorry.
No, it will be interesting because I think.
There's people,
Yeah.
or is that, yeah.
Starting.
We'll wait for Ben.
Right, well, that's needed, it's just probably gonna continue that way. So it seems that's the culture that's.
That one.
So we'll see, to some degree, but I don't know.
Yeah,
Cleaner.
yeah, that's always been an interesting one.
Yes.
Yes, we know that. Thank you. Boom, it's the bottom one that says Water Literate Leaders. It's the one.
I want to.
So your wife works here, right? Is that what that, yeah, because I met her, I spoke with her last month and she was like, my husband's 500% nice car. Yeah. Oh, yeah, she's busy right now.
But considered.
I'm out. I'm out of here. I'm out of here.
Yeah, exactly.
So I heard that,
Clearly, they do.
yeah.
But yeah, it's not totally very. Like,
Yeah.
so.
Yeah, mentally, how about your facing that?
You get settled in your job?
Yeah, yes, but she's got next time now.
Only that's gold summit last week.
Yeah.
Writing that. She's.
You were PSD? Big change.
Okay.
Yeah.
Great one.
That's my You get to be a.
There's a lot of those.
Oh.
Well, just, yeah, I mean, just in the field, right? Like, you know, I mean, overall, PSD too.
Like,
Yeah.
around table meetings, or has pretty mass, but I don't think I'm like. We're
Yeah,
good.
my sisters are teaching, well, now one of the students in high school, they got full teachers for dinners. And
Very good.
stepfather was the principal and the stepfather was the principal.
And that's what I'm up, so. Not to. Really good timing for landscaping. We could open the windows and just. We know exactly where they are too. We can hear when they're moving and running around.
Okay, we've got water for private recreation now. We heard public recreation just before a break, so we've got Matt Reddy, who's regional biologist with Ducks Unlimited. Matt has worked on wetland and waterfowl conservation in Colorado, Wyoming, Nebraska, and Dakotas for over 30 years. As regional biologist, he's responsible for the development, funding, and implementation of conservation programs and projects that restore and protect important waterfowl habitats throughout Colorado and our neighboring states. He works with public agencies, partner organizations, and DU's bioengineering team to design, permit, fund, and deliver large-scale habitat and recreation improvement projects. These efforts require close understanding of how physical and administrative distribution of water in our basin impact habitat quality and the life success of targeted wildlife species, and the availability of high-quality recreation sites for millions of Colorado citizens. He lives in Fort Collins with his wife, son, and daughter. So let's welcome Matt. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you. It's great to be here. This is my first go around giving this presentation to this type of group, a broad diversity of interests. So I'm pretty interested how it's received, and hopefully I'll have enough time for conversation and feedback to talk about how conservation group like Ducks Unlimited fits into the broader water picture in the basin of the South Platte. So in my talk today, I'm gonna give you a little more introduction about me and especially the company I work for, Ducks Unlimited. Just a general topic about what's going on with the birds, because that's what I am. I'm a bird biologist. You got to listen to me talk about birds. And then slowly take that into the more of the water realm about habitat conservation and water, how that ties into various aspects of recreation. And then we'll get into the nitty gritty of water supply in a place like the South Platte Basin. What room is there for ducks to get water when everybody else needs it too? And then really dive into how we actually do business. And that's really collaboration with other water users in the basin. And like I said, talk, hopefully engender some kind of conversation about all the different things we do and how we do it. And then throughout my talk, I'm gonna show you really cool pictures of birds and other animals, because it can get pretty dry, but one of the benefits of my job as a biologist is I get to see stuff like this every day, and I know most of you probably don't. So this is a window into my world for you guys in this office today. Those are green and teal. So who am I? Funny enough, when I started my career a long, long time ago as a wildlife biologist, I was about as far away from water as you can imagine. This is me in one of my first wildlife jobs in the deserts of western Colorado doing mammals work. But through my career, I ended up being a waterfowl biologist. That's mainly because I'm from South Dakota and I grew up duck hunting before I moved out here in Greeley, Colorado. They just needed somebody in Colorado who understood ducks, and they said South Dakota ducks here have a job, and I made a 30-year career out of it. But here's me with some of my kids up in North Park doing some research work. I do do some waterfowl research as a biologist. This is my family. My wife Jody, she actually works here at the Community Foundation, and I'm feeding Gus, and they are why I do this work. But this is really what my job is about. These guys right here. My job as a waterfowl biologist for Ducks Unlimited is to make sure that ducklings are produced mainly up in the Canadian prairies. I won't get into all the waterfowl ecology because I'm really dry, but yeah, this is what I'm supposed to be doing. It's making baby ducks. And I work for a company that does the Ducks Unlimited. How many of you folks have heard of the Ducks Unlimited? Oh, that's great. How many of you attended one of our events? Yeah, a little less great, but we are a conservation organization. We're one of the older ones. So we're 85 years old, and we're an international organization. You can see on our badge here that we work in Canada, Mexico, and the United States. We were established in 1937, which if you recall was the drought years of the Great Depression and the dirty 30s. And we are an organization that was founded by waterfowl hunters who were concerned with the precipitous decline of waterfowl populations we observed in those years. And so they formed a group to raise money to do habitat work to support their recreational activity, which is waterfowl hunting. They formed this volunteer group to raise money to go do conservation work on the Canadian prairies. We remain a grassroots volunteer-driven organization. I'm professional staff. But the core of Ducks Unlimited is 640,000 members who put on lots and lots of fundraising events. Lots of people think Ducks Unlimited is a clothing company, but we are a habitat company that raises a lot of money. This is our mission. I won't go through it, but what you notice is it doesn't necessarily explicitly mention recreation as our mission. DU is a habitat conservation organization. Now, it's implicit that the reason we do that is our volunteers love to go out and waterfowl. But when I look at projects, waterfowl recreation isn't at the top of the hunting recreation, is it providing habitat for the birds? Through those 85 years, we conserved more than 16 million acres in North America. It's not just wetlands, that's a lot of prairie work, where a lot of these birds nest in the Dakotas and Canada, 16 million acres. This is our vision, it speaks a little more to me. And what we want is wetlands on the ground sufficient to fill the skies with waterfowl today, tomorrow, and forever. And that's not an easy task, which we're getting to. This is just running through, just to show you kind of the pattern of delivery. You can see early in the mid-20th century, all of our work was in Canada. And starting in the 1980s, we started to expand down as we got a better understanding of waterfowl ecology and the whole life cycle need of the birds. We started to expand and deliver habitat conservation across North America. And you can see, even though it's across North America, it still is concentrated in those areas where the birds are, the flyways that they use. And so we focus our efforts on those. And luckily enough, South Platte, Colorado is one of those areas. So like I said, this is like our core client. I don't have to be immediately responsive to that, but there's a key understanding that to continue to do what these kind of guys want to do, go out and enjoy the morning in the marsh to shoot ducks, is that they have to have the habitat to support the bird populations. It's one tiny aspect of the overall North American model of wildlife conservation, where the people who enjoy using the resource have to pay to use that resource. And so through license fees, stamps, land purchases, kind of a lot of stuff we get into, they're supporting that overall life cycle for birds so we can continue to hunt. Now for the bad news. This is the birding part. So what's the overall bird population trend in North America? It is not good. Since I was born, we have lost 3 billion birds across the North American continent. That is a precipitous decline of a pretty amazing resource out there. We could spend a whole seminar session on why this is across the board, but just know that that is what we're pushing against when I do my job. It's the trends that result in this kind of bird population pattern is what I'm pushing against. And this is one of the ducks that kind of represents that trend. That's a northern pintail. It's my favorite duck. I think it's quite pretty. But this is a duck that is right along that native population trend. And we have to do a lot of work here in Colorado to maintain those populations. One of the reasons we see trends like that is maps like this, figures like this. This shows wetland loss since the European settlement across North America. And you can see there's a lot of areas that have done really poorly, mainly through agricultural conversion of wetlands. But even here in Colorado, we've seen half of our wetlands lost since European settlement. Some vision. The birds. You can see this kind of stuff right now. We're going through spring migration for waterfowl. So if you drive back to Greeley or somewhere else, you drive by some ponds. Right now is about the time where you see a lot of these birds. Whereas we get further into the summer, we might only see a mallard or two. And of course, all the Canada geese, all we folks have to deal with probably on a daily basis. But I wanted to show, include this slide to just kind of show what that half of our wetlands lost looks like on the landscape. So we were partners in a study in the San Luis Valley, southern Colorado, to kind of use science and remote sensing and take a look and really be able to map what that looks like. And so what this figure shows is, this is the time period, northern San Luis Valley, so the Rio Grande headwaters area, in the period 1984 to 1986. And this panel shows more recent, 10 years ago. What this green shows are surface water wetlands and surface water. And so these are shallow water wetlands on the landscape that support lots of duck populations, but also lots of other wildlife populations and a lot of agricultural economies as well. What's happened is a combination of water administration, climate change, and a whole lot of other things. As you can see, this dramatic shift in the availability of surface water wetlands. And this is just one kind of approximate example of what a loss of half the wetlands on the landscape looks like. So as a manager of waterfowl populations, what my job is to do is try to keep bird populations at the levels we want them while looking at something like this. And this is the change. As you know, by the red, water issues in the San Luis Valley are as earnest and deep as they are here in the South Platte Basin. And it's not an easy problem to solve. If we had water like this and everybody was happy and there's water everywhere, it probably wouldn't be as hard to do my job. And I probably wouldn't have to have a half-hour talk to tell you how we do our work, but that's not the case. And this is reflected across many saltwater basins.
What's the dark green one?
So these are all, center pivot grounds, so it's potatoes and barley.
Okay.
Mainly, so Coors grows a lot of their barley in this part of the world, and potatoes reign supreme. This is what we're focused on, because this is where all the ducks are, but other water administration and agricultural water interests are really focusing here because they're depleting the aquifers in the San Luis Valley, and the state passed a statute that they have to manage that aquifer level. This is totally off duck topics, but this is what we're all facing. And so what they're doing is they're retiring a lot of these center pivots. We've seen some of that in South Valley Basin, but there's programs here to take these out of production so that less water is used, because these draw from the deep aquifer underneath the San Luis Valley.
So that impacts your issues even more?
It does in a complicated way. One way is not so much ducks, but sandhill cranes are a big water issue too. And they tend to roost in areas like this where there's wetlands, and can come into these barley fields and feed. And as you reduce the amount of feed available on the landscape, you can't just have one component where they roost, you both where they roost in like feed. Now we're really getting into biology. So it does impact that, and then when you drop the aquifer levels totally, it does tend to impact these areas as well, because groundwater supports the surface water coming down, it perches it on top, so if you were to go.
Those years in the eighties, like really, really wet though, are those unusually wet years?
Whether they were wet,
Yeah.
and we know that in climate cycles.
Yeah.
And they were, so we recognize that in the paper.
Yeah.
We'll take this from, but this is a trend that we don't think it's gonna cycle. It's where that bottom and top are, where you set things. And we know that we'll probably never get back to that, even if we did get into a wet cycle.
I think one other point as well, though, is, I mean, we've had the sessions on agriculture and municipality use and buy and dry, and the San Luis Valley is not immune from that either. I mean, my in-laws are from there and they're big into agriculture, and so municipal desire for water to try to export it out of the valley is something that's very real as well.
Absolutely, and that does impact us, because those schemes are basically focusing in on this area right here.
Yeah.
And this is Baca National Wildlife Refuge, which if they did that, we're successful in exporting water, which we're not taking an official position on one way or the other, but it would impact these wetlands significantly by dropping the bottom out of the aquifer, and so these would probably disappear even more. And why is this important to us? This part of this figure shows basically kind of the portions of wetlands, uplands generally in North America. And you can see that wetlands across North America are only 5% of the landscape. And I guarantee you in Colorado, it is a much slimmer pie than that because of our air environment. But we know, at least for birds, and this probably applies across the board for most terrestrial wildlife, is 80% of the species rely on wetlands in some way as part of their life cycle. So what you're trying to do is take all of those species and utilize that little ground, and if that ground is constantly collapsing, again, it makes the job hard to do, and it's probably one of the reasons we see those declines. There's a mink eating a frog, so it's not just ducks that use these wetlands, it's the whole life cycle. So I'm gonna take this period and kind of step it back down. Those are kind of broad trends, bird populations, some ideas of why they might be happening, and just talk about the South Platte Basin. Is everybody here from Platte Basin, or is it across the board? Okay. I just took a guess and thought the Platte might be a good example. So here's the Platte Basin, and a couple things to recognize. What this shows is basically our service area for Ducks Unlimited. The South Platte Basin, as I said, is a critical area for waterfowl. That's mainly because birds from Canada fly into Mexico in winter and then fly back. They need a place to stop and refuel and feed, and the South Platte is one of those. You can see it's mainly an east-west river, cuts right across the flyway. So they're very keen to fly in periods like this, especially in spring, find places to land, eat, and roost before they fly out to Canada to begin nesting. So we've spent my career and a little bit longer working with public and private partners up and down the South Platte Basin to identify, protect, and develop waterfowl habitats. And we work both on public, the pink is public lands, and then also in yellow. So the yellow represent protected private lands that have we've developed wetland complexes on for habitat reasons. They tend to actually function in the fall as recreation sites. So these are principally folks from the metro area who drive out to the eastern plains along the river to hunt ducks in the fall. We work with them to make sure that the habitat they provide is provided year round. So if the birds coming back in the spring have a place to do their thing. And it's important to know that our clients are duck hunters, but there's only about 13,000 to 20,000 duck hunters in Colorado in a given year. The vast majority of them come from this area, and the vast majority of them use the South Platte. The Arkansas Basin has a few, San Luis Valley has a few, and then it's scattered here and there. But this is the principal waterfowling area in Colorado. Campusbacks. These are diving ducks. These are the ducks that, interestingly, were very numerous back in the late 19th century in the Chesapeake Bay, and market hunting essentially wiped out these populations. And the big change in wildlife law that brought about the North American model that said you cannot market hunt North American wildlife. These are one of the species that kind of keystone species for that, because these are vast populations of them that they just slaughtered them ruthlessly and sent them to cities for restaurants. And the populations declined so precipitously that they were one of those species that they said, yeah, we need to change how we manage wildlife in North America. So again, taking the South Platte, what's that look like for a duck, and what do we see when we look at the river and its environs? This is one of those private lands that was indicated on the map. This is DT Ranch. It's a private duck club located on the South Platte River near Jackson Reservoir, which is out by Fort Morgan. And this picture kind of encompasses the whole kit that we bring with the South Platte for a duck that's flying over. First, you have the river, and it provides habitat on its own. But the river also is diverted, and pasture lands are irrigated, which provides shallow water wetlands, which are preferred by waterfowl. You also have big storage reservoirs. So this is a Jackson Reservoir. It's an irrigation reservoir. So farmers divert water out of the river into the reservoir and hold it so that they can use it later in the season. That also provides a huge roosting area for numerous bird species, ducks and others combined. So that's a good element. And then you have the agricultural fields that are irrigated. Those provide really key food resources. Ducks eat wild food in wetlands like this, but they also really key in, especially in cold winter months, on corn and waste grain provided here. And so this kind of complex of different habitat types provided by the river and its water is really key. That's one of the reasons this region is important for waterfowl. And also, I'm doing municipal, it doesn't show here because we're not doing this here, but as we all know, those are along the Front Range. Municipal storage reservoirs, parks, open areas also provide lots of habitats for these birds. Yellow warbler, and the little bird. They use wetlands too. So where do we get the water to make that kind of thing happen? First thing I wanted to note, because I don't know how deep you get into water law or whatnot, but wildlife habitat and wetlands are considered a beneficial use. And so you can work within the prior appropriation system to divert waters for those uses. It's recognized. Most of the senior water does not have that as a decreed use, but a lot of the newer decrees do. So when we're going about working with landowners, public or private, we use natural flow of the river. It's a good habitat. We use groundwater and diverted surface water supplies by habitat. And the way we go about that is sometimes we do use new junior decreed water rights. It just is really contingent on where you are in the river to secure the water for a project. Most of the time, well, some of the time, you can use irrigation rights. There's a lot of rules about how you can use decreed irrigation rights to support wetland habitat, but you can do it under Colorado statute, rule, and policy. It's just very limited. You can't use those. And then sometimes we do have either a public agency or a private landowner will purchase senior rights, transfer them, and go through the agonism process of a change of senior rights. So they have a very senior priority on the river that they can use to support all the falling wetland habitat. These guys don't have to get water rights. Sometimes. A lot of the work we do does attract beavers and expands upon the work. It's a tight balance between administration of the river and bringing back beavers, and something Colorado statewide is trying to balance. But we support a lot of that work, and they're a lot cheaper than my engineers.
Yeah.
So yeah, just to show you again, here's that complex. One of the things that's happening is the river changes, as we change the hydrograph, the river itself changes. And we spend a lot of time doing things like this to try and take it back, at least functionally, to what the river used to provide. And what this is a warm water slough restoration, is old river channels associated with the main river channel receive groundwater flows out, and that water tends to be warmer than the other waters. Just the surface water flows, and so they stay open longer, and it's very important habitat. They tend to fill in though without the big pulses of water that we typically have, and so we spend a lot of time with machinery digging them out. And then it looks pretty messy there, I know, like, what are you guys doing? But eventually it'll come back to look like something like that. And that's a case where we don't have to have a water right. Sometimes. If you have questions, you can talk to me there. Just a little mallard in the snow. I'm gonna speed up a little bit because you can see the time. Other things we do are just more constructed wetlands, where we divert irrigation water and other water rights onto places that used to be floodplain and have wetlands, where we build the infrastructure to deliver that water, much like we were irrigating haylands. And this is kind of fresh off a build. This is what it looks like. And so this pasture did not receive any water until we brought in these dikes and the conveyance systems to reflood that up. And we can time that specifically to grow late foods and provide habitats. That's a great eater, finds food. So how does this actually work? How do we do that kind of stuff in Water Short Basin? I mean, you probably have seen these, at least in this seminar or somewhere else. This shows just municipal and industrial shortfalls in supply on the South Platte River across multiple different kind of demographic scenarios. What this doesn't show at all is the needs for all the different bird species and other wildlife species that are out there. And so a lot of attention is paid how much water can we get to different people, different users in the basin, and wildlife and other concerns, recreation, are way down on the bottom. They don't even show up on the graphs in the water plan where this graph is taken from. American accent. And we also know that water is really expensive. We're pretty good at raising money for wildlife, but we cannot compete with municipalities and other folks probably in this room when it comes to finding CBT water or other shares to get that out on the landscape. So we're kind of stuck. So what do we do? I had a story about a rail, but I don't tell you so. What we do is kind of take our guidance from something like this. So this shows all the different kind of services that wetlands provide to society at large. And way down here at the bottom is what I'm doing, providing hunting opportunities. And nobody really cares about living in that place. Compared to things like we all care about clean water, clean air, providing a home for wildlife. These are all really popular things and supportive. The general public supports it. So how does that play into it? Well, basically that is a recipe. And how does this guy get what he needs in that kind of circumstance where nobody cares if he does? It's a recipe for collaboration. And that's really what I'm here to spend the next 5 minutes talking about, is we work with people who have water, but don't have ducks to achieve our habitat and conservation goals. Or the flip side of the coin is people can use ducks, folks that you may work with, municipal water providers, agricultural water providers, can work with people who care about ducks to make more water in the river to achieve those other societal goals. And what I'm going to show you is one way we do that, and that's the managed aquifer recharge on the South Platte River. Northern shelters, quite a pretty duck, but kind of fun looking nose. So I think something, we're all from the South Platte Basin, I can hazard to guess that these species of animals, birds and fish, bring us all together in a way. Does anybody know, besides Laura, what these all, how these bring us together? They don't even live in Colorado, except sometimes that one. What's that?
Recovery.
Yeah, I didn't see who said that, but that's exactly right. These are endangered species in Nebraska. And as part of the Endangered Species Act, the federal government governs the recovery of those species, and they demanded that Nebraska, Wyoming, and Colorado come up with a recovery plan. Those species are all wetland dependent species in Nebraska. And what they need is flows in Nebraska. Colorado, as part of this recovery implementation plan, has to provide those flows. That impacts us all because the Endangered Species Act prohibits all new water development in the South Platte Basin unless you can overcome injury caused by new depletions to the river. That is really hard and a big drag on economies and development and ag and all these different sectors. But every time anybody wanted to change how they use water, South Platte water, which is almost all water, they had to go to the Fish and Wildlife Service and have an individual consultation with the Fish and Wildlife Service to see how they're not going to impact those species will down in Nebraska. And the reason is the river used to look like this. And now it looks like this with a bunch of trees. Those species we were just looking at, they don't like this. They much prefer this. So how would you make a river look like that? Well, we're not going to, but we can at least work on flow regimes and providing that water in this recovery plan to kind of meet their needs on the river recovery plan. And we do that through a group called South Platte RAP, Fish and Wildlife Service, the state of Colorado, folks like us all got together and put together what's called the Tamarack Plan. And they essentially provide that water to Nebraska to manage aquifer recharge. And basically what that is, for those of you who aren't familiar, is in times of supply in the river, which is usually the winter time and spring, when there's high flows in the river and nobody's using it specifically for ag, you can take that water that's in the alluvial aquifer and pump it into wetland recharge basins. Those basins then, when the river is dry in the summer, basically they're far off into the uplands, and that water percolates down and hits the alluvial aquifer, and South Platte is a gaining river, and it pops back out of the river when it looks like this in the summer because of all the ag withdrawals. So we're retiming that water such that, especially at the Nebraska state line, you get water in the river. So here's a kind of broad map of all the different places where we've done work like this. But specifically, the two stars show where the Tamarack Plan takes place. One is on Tamarack State Wildlife Area, a public area that's hunted for waterfowl. And the other one I'm going to talk about here is on private land. It's right next to the state line.
That Jumbo.
Jumbo is under the star. It's nearby. And these don't represent the entirety of all the work we've done. These are just some of the bigger ones. One outside of Greeley, we work with a petroleum company to have augmentation supply for them on a state wildlife area. Just up and down the river, but there's much more smaller recharge work projects we've done. And so this is what it looks like. This is essentially the private lands tract. It's the waterfowl hunter from Denver bought this property as a wildlife property and wanted to develop the waterfowl potential on it. We worked with him to kind of conceptually design taking water from the river and putting it into a series of created wetland basins that recharge the aquifer. This is what our engineering designs look like for something like that. And the key here is the collaboration. Again, this is the property we are interested in and doing habitat work. But one of the problems is these wells, they call them the orphan wells, is this agricultural production is threatened to be shut down because they were taking water not a priority to run these pivots. And so the local conservancy district, water conservancy district, needed to find a way to offset their depletions. They partnered with South Platte RAP, who needed to send water downriver to meet endangered species needs. And then they brought us into the fold to put in the actual infrastructure. Such that again, when there's water in the river, we pull it out. They're doing it right now. They're pumping right here on the river and putting water into these ponds, right, as all these birds that we're talking about are moving through. Such that these folks can pump in the summer to grow the crops and such that we meet our obligations to Nebraska under the Endangered Species Act. This is really what we care about. This is bird response to a recharge wetland. These are created wetlands. They're way out of the river plain. But again, if you've lost half, sometimes you just say, yeah, let's go make some more. And they birds really do respond well to them. So it's collaborations like this, and that's just a couple of other photos. It's collaborations like this that allow us to have some amount of hope. Saw that steep curve, I scared you all and made you sad about birds. And it is bad. I don't want you to walk away. It is really bad and you need to help the birds. So through stuff like this and organizations like us and others that we work with, we have been able to, at least for most waterfowl, maintain population levels because we're very keen and interested. And that's what duck hunters bring to the table. Is a very specific and keen interest that they really want to invest a lot of money in. And that's one of the reasons, it's not the only reason, but it's one of the reasons, at least for waterfowl and associated species, we've been able to maintain populations while the rest of our bird populations go. What we want is not these to do that, we want these to go that way. And so hopefully water collaborations like I just showed you will allow us to do that.
I just wonder about the canals and ditches that have been built over the many decades and access to water for fowl in that way.
Yeah, it's a complicated system. But right now, where we're at right now, those ditches and canals are our best friends. So they provide the kind of complex of habitats we have. We've changed the whole nature of the Platte River system and how birds used to use it. The birds are responsive enough and have kind of behavioral plasticity enough that they can adapt to those agricultural changes. And if we got rid of those canals and ditches, or if we make them really, really efficient by tightening them up, a lot of the wetlands and other habitats that those really leaky systems provide to our birds will go away. And that's something, that's a whole nother water policy issue we watch. This conversion to highly efficient systems takes a lot of the surface water off of the landscape, and it will impact wildlife populations, especially waterfowl. Great question.
For the loss of wetlands, it's at 50% for Colorado, but with the ditches, it does create different types of like riparian
It does.
some wetlands.
So.
What are the wetlands that were lost?
So we've lost most of those really flashy wetlands, and the irrigation systems and our kind of rejiggering of the hydrology of the whole system tends to give us more permanent, deeper bodies of water. And so up and down the Front Range, we have big, deep gravel pits and reservoirs and whatnot, and waterfowl use those, but they don't provide really good foraging habitats.
Mhm.
They need those really shallow things that are there and they're gone and they're gone. Those are what we've lost.
Because
So how does Ducks Unlimited choose partners to work with? For example, I work for the town of Severance and I'm vice president on a ditch board. And the ditch board, that water doesn't really service any agriculture anymore, so we're trying to figure out what that water is gonna go towards. It has 2 reservoirs and it's a seepage right. So right now we're in talks with maybe Pheasants Unlimited. We haven't talked about Ducks Unlimited. How is that partnership and is that something that you're even interested in?
Yes, we work, I mean, I didn't focus on it here, but we worked with many municipalities and ditch companies, and we're all filling the fulcrum between those two. And as things transition, and so how do we pick projects? It's very seldom that I would say no to somebody. The problem is it's just capacity, and can we serve your needs as quickly as you need us to? Because there's a need across the board, and so we'll never say no. We'll always come out and visit folks like yourselves and see how much we can do, but then we have to look at like, what's the impact for our time here? If we get enough of you folks to come to us and want to work, then we can hire more biologists and come and do the work, but it's a tenuous business. But no, we worked, with everybody from Denver all the way out to Julesburg, municipalities and ditch companies. And sometimes they work great, other times there's issues and we just have to walk away from each other. But we have a pretty strong, long history of doing this. We've been delivering stuff like this since basically 1992-ish.
I have a question.
Yeah.
So on that hunting property example, who pays for that infrastructure? Is it Ducks Unlimited? You do the work or
I'm
does
so glad you asked that.
pay a portion of it?
So South Platte RAP, which is the group that collects fees, you have to buy, if you want to develop any new water supply in the South Platte Basin, you have to buy a certificate from this group called South Platte RAP. There might be a couple removed, your water provider might do that for you if you're a real estate developer, or I don't know how it all works, but ultimately, somebody who wants to develop a new water supply like the Nist Reservoir has to buy a bunch of certificates from this group called South Platte RAP. They collect that money and they develop these systems that we talked about with it. And so South Platte RAP took some of those monies and gave them to us. We matched it with wildlife money that we have access to at the federal and state level. Also a lot of our donors, we have people who give us money to do this work. We match those together and then we went and built that system. So that's the first front end cost. Who runs the thing? Because that's really where a lot of the cost is. And as part of the deal, that Water Conservancy District representing those landowners took on, they're the ones who ran with the decreed right because we needed a new water right on that system. So they did all that work. And then working with all of those farmers whose operations we saved, they're the ones that actually do the work of flipping the pumps on and running the water. So that's kind of how that's set up.
So you mentioned recharge, like that's very Colorado water. That's very, I mean, centric that. So, but what you do is more of a rehabilitation or habitat, but the, I don't know, the interplay between the two, how did that work? Because petroleum companies gonna want to get credit for the water they use. And so what they're trying, I'm kind of reading between lines trying to figure out that if this was their water plan, you were their augmentation strategy and the recharge was that augmentation or part of that water plan. So I guess I'm wondering too, they got kind of the ecological and that kind of credit, which brought the state kind of into the fold and it made those monies available, right? But then they also did the sciencey recharge thing. And so I guess, if somebody kind of to Nick's point, if somebody wanted to try and do that, I guess, how do you go about figuring out whether or not the area that we would be looking at is key on that, like, how do you do a scoping study?
Yeah, no, that's fantastic. So one of the big changes that occurred in the 70s and 80s is aquifer recharge is a science unto itself. And it is a strategy that's used by lots of different people to meet their augmentation needs as part of their kind of water use plans. What happened in the 70s and 80s is wildlife people recognized, again, we can't afford water on the scale that most other people can, is that if we came in and altered how they design, I didn't get into this, but most augmentation recharge ponds just want to inject as much water as possible as fast as possible into the ground. What we said is, hey, if you take a step back and you make these more wildlife friendly, specifically waterfowl friendly, if you make them shallow, and if you make their hydro periods such that when they ultimately percolate out, that they grow the right foods and then you flood them again, that will have really good benefits for waterfowl on top of your administrative need to offset your injury to senior users. And so that's what we look at when we're looking at folks is if you have a stomach to maybe lose some of your augmentation supply so that we can come in and enjoy the wildlife benefits from it. Added on top of that, what I'm supposed to be talking about is the recreation potential, either on private or public lands. A lot of the augmentation supply is during periods of waterfowl hunting season. And so Parks and Wildlife is very, very interested. And there's multiple state wildlife areas that hold these. And so if you have a water provider that has a need to offset their depletions, and they're willing to do it on a public area that can provide habitat, they're going to rise right to the top and it'll get a lot of support from folks like us and state sources of them. Did that answer your question?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, it wasn't an easy question. I didn't expect you to have the specific answer, but it's kind of how do you put all the pieces together to get that?
I mean, the oil company we work for, they're actually a water supplier to the frackers in Weld County. And so just across the river from really in Evans, there's a state wildlife area. That was just a bunch of dry land fields, very little irrigated agriculture, didn't really have a lot of public value for recreation because it was just a public access site. But we recognized it as a place where this water provider for the fracking industry really needed to put river, recharge water back to the river to offset a well that's closer to, one of the little towns up there. And so they did all the work, took it through court, did all that, supplied us the water, and we built a number of shallow water wetland impoundments on this state wildlife area that now supports water health. Because they flood it up, it grows that food, and then we flood it up again.
Sounds like offsite mitigation is what kind of sounds like, that they, just make sure that when they did this over here, it came back and back.
Yeah, to the degree that you need to offset depletions, if you want to change the use of a well or increase the use, yeah.
All right, well, we've got to wrap it up, but thanks so much, Matt. All right, I'm gonna introduce our next speaker. He's coming in the door here. Come on in. So now we are going to switch over and we're doing water for industry. So here with us, we've got Eric England. He is the water operations manager of the Occidental Petroleum Corporation. He's a native Colorado farm kid and works on all things water related for the company's operations in the Rockies, including activities for construction, drilling, hydraulic fracturing, production, disposal, and recycle. He spent his career working with agricultural, municipal, and industrial water rights, regulations, permitting, and projects in Colorado and Wyoming. He also served on the boards of the South Platte Water-Related Activities Program, so that's just what Matt was talking about, SPRAP. The Colorado Water Congress and the Colorado Produced Water Consortium. He has degrees in mechanical engineering, agricultural engineering, and organizational leadership, and he's a registered professional engineer in Colorado, Utah, and Wyoming. So welcome.
Thank you.
Go ahead. I think Benjamin's getting it pulled up.
Yes. Great. It's all right. If you guys stand over here on the side. Thanks for having me this morning. Look forward to talking with you. I got about 45 minutes of slides and about 15 minutes to do it. So I may talk fast and I apologize for that, but try to keep this on schedule. Please interrupt along the way and ask questions.
So you're happy with the PDF version? Is that?
I'm okay with that if you are.
Yeah, that's what I have access to as far as I know, unless you have.
Yes, I didn't bring a separate.
Okay, cool.
Yeah, that would be.
Get it on the main screen so people can actually see.
My personal joke is that of all the things I've got to do in water in my career, I haven't done recreation. So my hope is snowmaking or maybe river rafting at some point. Turns out to get to enjoy it. Again, Eric England. I've been in the oil and gas industry now for just over 10 years. I started with Anadarko Petroleum, who was more recently purchased by Occidental Petroleum. And we continue to actively operate here in Colorado and also in Wyoming, and I get to be involved in some of our water resource related projects there. I'll skip this. You already got a little bit of info, but I'm a native Coloradan, fourth generation. My kids are fifth, and I'm excited for them to get a lot of the experiences that I've gotten to have growing up there as well. Taking just a minute to reflect on all the things we think of around oil and gas. It can be a polarizing industry, but also recognizing the many things that we benefit from. It's easy to think of maybe transportation or heating associated products that come from oil and gas, but there's so many other components that we use every day. Household products, personal care, makeup, your phone, your computer. Our company not only focuses on oil and gas, but we have several other businesses. One of them is OxyChem, and they use some of the products from oil and gas to make one of the largest contributions of chlorine in the US to many wholesale and retail users. If you've been in a hot tub or in a pool, you've probably experienced our product. We also develop caustic soda, PVC. Most of the waterline pipe made here in the US has our product in it as well. So there are a lot of other components that are byproducts that we've been able to make successful contributions for these in industry. Our company also has a
carbon capture and sequestration division. Later this year, we hope to bring on the largest US direct air capture unit in West Texas. So we're excited to see how that goes. A lot of innovative collaboration coming together, first of its kind on this scale. Our company's commitment is to be carbon neutral by 2050. That doesn't just mean for what our operations footprint is, but for all the products we bring to market, we want to make sure we're also offsetting all of the carbon impacts there, and we can do that through some of these other initiatives. We have some geothermal projects upcoming here in Colorado and some other exciting things too, which we can talk about more if we have some time. I wanted to reflect on the U.S. Energy Department's forecast of energy needs going forward and highlight the different sectors of energy that intend to contribute to that global demand. We're all experiencing the robust advances in renewables. We see a lot of those influences every day around us with solar and wind and some of the other new components. But a key factor to note is that the liquid fuels as well as natural gas and coal are still forecasted to be needed for an extended period of time as we make this energy transition. And because the energy demand globally is not staying static, we have continuing developed countries, increasing energy needs, AI even needs more power. And so it's kind of an all of the above, and we embrace that and we want to be part of that solution as best that we can. I don't mean to bore you or to dumb down the process, but I just want to reflect a little bit on the oil and gas process here locally as it relates to what we do. A typical well today takes around a week to drill. Fracking or completing that well also takes another week to interact with the formation and prepare it to generate oil and gas. And then once we are able to turn that over to production, those wells we're seeing productivity forecasted out for at least 20 plus years. Locations here. Now, more specifically, there's a lot of effort that goes into identifying where is the oil and gas, what are the formations we'll be operating in. Here in Colorado, you hear a lot about the DJ Basin. It is a fairly robust area for oil and gas. People have likened it, at least as they portray to me. If you think of an avocado, you have this center seed, you have this light green around it, and then it gets a little darker and darker, and then you have this thick black ring around the end. If you think of the Platteville area, that would be the seed or the center or the hottest area of the DJ Basin. Most gassy, the lightest type of oil, and then the further out you get, even all the way up into Wyoming, you see it get thicker and darker within the area. There are formations similar and also different, but also oil and gas reserves all across the state in all the quadrants, and other operators using other technologies to try to access those. For the oil wells that we do drill, oil and gas wells, we're drilling about 7,500 feet down today here in the DJ Basin. Now today we'll extend anywhere from 1 mile to 3 miles out to access the minerals, a function of the surface relationships, the mineral rights that we have, and some of the formation conditions if there are faults or other activities. Very exciting, our drilling team most recently just this last year has drilled some L-shaped wells, and they just recently completed a U-shaped well. So very innovative and using the technologies to get better and better. What that allows us to do is to continue to stay at a fairly condensed surface point, but access more minerals without those disturbances in other areas. One thing particular to water resources we're very concerned about and are committed to the constructability of the wells and ensuring that we're protecting the aquifers. So there are several barriers of concrete and steel that are constructed through those aquifer layers. We do have a responsibility to identify the aquifer as we drill through it. We used water-based mud, so we're not introducing oil or other components to that fluid. And then we want to ensure in the long term, we're protecting the aquifer from the well, but we're also protecting the well from the aquifer, as interactions both ways can have impacts.
Is that a new practice or that's been going on since that kind of protecting the water area?
I believe there's been a very active effort for at least the last 15 years. And some of the older wells didn't have as much focus or didn't have as much science to be precise about this constructability. But it's a very key component in all of our planning going forward. One of the biggest uses of water for us is the fracturing process. And once the well is constructed, our completions team will come in, they will perforate this well at various intervals to be able to interface with the shale formation. We use water because it's a fairly incompressible but movable fluid. Under high pressure, high rates, we can crack the rock. Then we use sand to crack the door open and keep it open so the oil and natural gas can make it back to the formation, and then we can return it at surface. So typically in a solution, it's about 90% water, about 9.5% sand, and then the other 0.5% are other compounds to help make the process work better. And for example, we use a bleach or a biocide on the water. What we don't want to introduce is organics to the formation because we'll create H2S, we'll sour the formation, we'll impact the quality of the well, we'll make it harder to operate it will be less safe. So we make sure that we address the bugs just like we will even in the municipal water type of treatment process. That water getting pushed that far down and at high rates and high pressures, you can develop friction. So we tend to use a surfactant, almost like a soap that makes the water wetter, so it doesn't get held up in the process. We use a friction, not only a friction reducer, but also a rust inhibitor. So as that water is interfacing with the steel casing, we're not creating any issues there. And then when you get to the very far end of the well, which we would call the toe versus the heel, when you get out to the toe and you have sand in solution, even under high pressures, that sand would have the natural potential to settle out. So sometimes we'll use something to help keep that sand in solution. Something like you would think a gelatin, like Jello or guar gum that you might find in your ice cream, something that keeps it in there a little bit longer, just so we can get to those end stages. We typically only use it in those end stages, as the further back we get, the easier it is to place the sand without some of those limitations. Then once we've completed the well, it's ready to turn on. We'll reverse the flow. We'll let the formation naturally push the fluids back up. Typically see a higher volume of water initially because a lot of that water is just put into the formation. And then we'll also see the oil and gas returning to the surface. The fluids that come up are naturally pressured by the gas that's in the formation. Over time, you may see those pumper jacks go up, or now they have some new, more vertical hydraulic type units. That's when the gas pressure runs out. There's still oil down there, but it doesn't have the natural ability to lift it, but we want to continue to access that resource. But early on, using all the energy that's available to bring it to the surface, and then with the surface equipment, we'll separate out the oil and the gas and the water so that those can go to their respective processing and marketing imports. I wanted to just take a side step to talk about the water energy nexus. It's a increasingly common theme. There's a lot of research CSU does, Colorado School of Mines, focusing on this interactivity and connectivity with water. And water and energy are strongly influenced by where you're operating, where you need the water is, where the energy is. Local, state, federal regulations. Are you Eastern US versus Western US prior appropriation? All of those factors that play into it. But in short, if you want water, you probably need energy to get it in some fashion. If we're going to bring water up in the CPT project, we got to pump it over the mountain. If we want to treat and clean water to be able to drink and use, it's going to take energy. If we want to get it out to our irrigation systems, we're probably going to need energy. On the other side, in order to make energy available, a lot of times water is a critical component, certainly for our industry with the hydraulic fracturing. You think about hydropower and all the plants that are in place here in our region. But even in other processes, manufacturing, mining of materials for some of the other energy solutions like solar and wind, that upfront water energy interface to be able to make those products available. For our company, this is more of an industry representation, but it is a diagram that we take very seriously, and our team specifically is just this life cycle of water within our operations. If there's a blue dot on the map, then water's involved. It's really kind of a silly way to say, hey, water is in everything that we do in our operations. And so our teams charge our responsibility, and what we love to do is to find ways to be resourceful in each of the phases, all the way from the beginning of constructing a road to location, to drilling the well and cementing, to the completion process, to when the produced water comes back up, how do we treat and reuse it, We find we have different customers internally that need water, others have surplus, both need transportation solutions, and we try to get involved in all those phases to make this wheel go around a lot more efficiently and to be more responsible with that limited resource. For our operations in Colorado, the water we use is a non-fresh, non-potable supply. It's all approved for commercial and industrial type use. It's water that is available to be used to full consumption. So we're ensuring that the water has those capabilities to be utilized in those conditions. We don't completely avoid, but we certainly try to minimize the situations where we may be competing with other users in the state. This diagram was put together a few years ago, but even with recent information from the state engineer's office, it's still very close. And that's that the actual hydraulic fracturing process across all of oil and gas operations in the state is around 0.1% of total water demand of all uses in the state. So our efficiency with it has increased. On a per well basis, you may see more water used, but in aggregate and across the state, our overall use is still quite small, and it's very limited to these particular types of waters that are available.
Where are you getting the non-hot water? I mean, where are you buying that?
Most of our water comes from the Denver metro area, and it's as a series of contributions of municipal wastewater effluents or industrial wastewater effluents or other industrial water that's approved for other processes that are in surplus. Some of the communities that we work with, they have a forecasted surplus for a period of time. And so during that period, we're able to use some of that supply. We envision ourselves kind of as a bridge in a sense, because we are able to pay more for water in certain circumstances. We're able to use some of these supplies that others aren't able to use. That helps those entities fund and continue to develop their systems for the future beyond oil and gas in the area. These are just a couple of pictures of some of our operations here. On the left-hand side, a canal structure, which I'll talk a little bit more about later. A water distribution system on the bottom left, also mentioning more, but moving water around by pipeline. We have some surface transportation equipment. Once we get the water close to where we need it, we're using some of these portable operations. And then when we get the water back, we focus on the treatment processes as well. We have both portable and permanent facilities set up for water treatment. This water distribution system, Denver here, really just to the north, Longmont here, Johnstown, Milliken. We have this footprint within our mineral acreage, which allows us to interact with this increasingly urban area in a as little impact as possible. We estimate about 1,500 trucks a day are not driving with water because we can pipe the water. We have several of these industrial sources interconnected, and it really helps with our operations. One of the biggest challenges historically has been storage on pad and on location. So our well pads have been big. We've gotten them much smaller because we don't need that extra storage. We don't need that extra buffer. This system can provide water on demand to our needs out there in the field.
Do other oil and gas companies have similar systems, or are you utilizing the same system?
This is our system specifically, but there are similar systems out there. Some of the larger operators, Civitas and Chevron, also have infrastructure systems where they've made the investment in moving water. And it's subject to where they're located and where their supplies are, but it is pretty common in this area for the bigger companies to use these types of systems. We made a decision back in our Anadarko days. This infrastructure is largely a similar alignment of our oil and gas gathering system. So oil pipelines, gas pipelines, we were able to put all three lines in at the same time and provide that shared infrastructure, that shared efficiency with constructability, and it's been the backbone for our water solutions here. 450 million barrels of water to date, 42 gallons per barrel, 7,758 barrels per acre foot. It's just about 58,000 acre feet, 58,000 acre feet of water that we've moved in the last 12 years through this system. Water recycling, I did want to mention, just this last year, House Bill 1242 is a new rule in place that's further encouraging the industry to recycle more and more water and to cut down on our freshwater use or our non-potable water usage. One of the processes we have in place, but we're continuing to enhance, is our focus on recycling the dirty water, the produced water that comes up from the oil wells. How can we clean it up and be able to use it for additional purposes? So we have both mobile operations. I kind of try to highlight, we get the raw water, we can treat it and directly take it to our operations. Ultimately, we've worked on some processes, but we have not implemented yet all the way treating it to a surface discharge quality, and then maybe being able to return it to the surface for either our use or other users. We can reintroduce that water into our infrastructure system. There could be other users downstream that then could have the benefit of using that water as well. So both from a technology and a resource commitment, as well as now with some of the newer regulations, recycling is becoming an increasingly critical component of our operations going forward. And then some of the additional benefits that have come from our system and our operations and our philosophy of water management have been benefits both internally and externally. We've been able to provide water, not just to our completions, our fracking team, but to several of the other business units. In our oil cooling process, because of the high temperatures, we see the product coming up. We have cooling operations that the water is able to be used for processing. We have fire suppression at some of our facilities to help protect, especially in remote areas where the local fire districts may not have, readily available service or access. And then we've been able to benefit when we have surplus capacity in our operations. We can help with water for third parties. We've helped with a couple of large county road projects in our service area. And then when we have surplus water, we're able to get it to agriculture and other users in the area. And then finally, I just wanted to circle back some of the things I'm really excited about and grateful for over the years. The chance to come up with some regional partnerships. The canal structure there on the left, we worked with Ditch and Reservoir Company here in northern Colorado. They help us divert our industrial supplies from the river to where we need it. We collaborated to find locations in their system where we can make improvements. Those systems are 150 years old, primarily supported by local agricultural shareholders. Big investments in infrastructure don't come very often. So working together, finding a solution that benefits our operations and also will allow them to continue to operate well into the future. And then the picture on the right, it's hard to tell in Denver on the bottom, really at the top. This is a stretch of the South Platte River, highlighted with the red oval there. Coordinating with other water users, we identified instead of us taking water out further upstream, closer to Denver, we can leave more water in the river in certain stretches, take it out for our other operations in new locations, and then there become additional enhancement benefits in those critical stretches of the river, recreational augmentation type benefits for other users as well. And that's come just through collaboration, finding out what other people need, finding ways we can partner together. So that's just a quick speed race through some of those things. Hopefully helpful, and happy to take any questions.
When you recycle the water, can it be used, 100% of it can be used, or you said sometimes you re-inject some of the water?
Correct.
Talk about what percentage of the water can you reuse?
Yeah, we have the ability to reuse about 20% of our produced water today. So the remainder of it is injected. That water could be accessed at some future date, but it's not currently being reused. We have the ability from technology to recycle up to about 90% of it at a more advanced cost. And there will always be some portion that, just because of high concentration of the byproduct, we won't be able to reuse all of it.
Yeah, kind of two-part question really quick. One, how many acre feet did you guys say you guys kind of own within your system? And then part two is, as you guys are traveling through different basins, things like that, moving water from, maybe the southern to the northern regions, things like that. Does any of that matter? Because right now, obviously up here in other basins, water has to kind of stay within its respective area. How does that work for you all?
Yeah, first for the water source, we made a commitment several years ago, and I'm sure as you talk to other water associates through this course, water rights are expensive and water court can be a lengthy process. And so we made a decision a long time ago that we wouldn't own water rights. We would lease pre-approved industrial rights. So whether it's an annual contract or a multi-year contract, we work with our partner associations to have the right to use the water, but we don't own the water specifically. So that helps to answer that part.
And how many leased acre do you guys go through then in a year?
It's very year to year dependent, but I would say an average year, maybe around 5,000 acre feet of water. Yeah. Just in fact, this year, our company, in January, chose to purchase another company in Midland, Texas. And while we were planning our business here, they said, nope, just kidding, we're gonna go this way this year. And so we had to, change our operations and change our plans and what our outlook was for water and all of those things. So we tried to build in a buffer and we try to contract certain supplies with a firm guarantee, and then we have optionality on additional water as the year demands change. And those contracts have worked pretty well with our partner providers. As far as the system, this example here of our infrastructure, it goes as far east as Keensburg, the Prospect Valley Basin. It goes as far west as Erie, south to the Weld Adams County line right down by Brighton, and then all the way up into that Johnstown, almost to Windsor area. But it's fairly contained within a couple of the districts within Division 1. So all of our water operations typically will reside within a division. And the only considerations for maybe trans-basin water or out-of-basin water would be because that's a source that one of our water partners is providing to us. So if Aurora has a reservoir in the West Slope, but through exchange, they bring that water over, or if there's CPT water used, those would be the situations where we may have a trans-basin type use, but typically it's all in-basin source.
Could you explain a little more about your disposal methods, what you currently do, and perhaps what your vision is for the future?
Yes, our current water disposal operations is to take surplus produced water and inject it down into deep formations. So our typical oil and gas formations in that 7,000 to 8,000 foot range. The dry formations that we're putting that water are in that 8,000 to 9,000 foot range.
Okay.
And our company, our CEO has made a commitment that by 2035, we want to be injection free. And that's across the entire organization. Quite frankly, we feel that's much more achievable in Colorado because actually the amount of produced water that's generated is comparatively smaller to our West Texas and New Mexico and international operations. But those are our goals and that's what we intend to try to do.
So give us a little sneak preview about what that might look like if you're not doing deep well injection. What might you be thinking about or planning for?
Yeah, most of those disposal facilities, and I'll try to go back to one of the slides just for a picture of what a facility looks like. This would be one of our disposal facilities. We have water both trucked in and piped into location. Majority of this process is to clean the water. We don't want to put water that's so dirty in the formation that we can never get it out or that it hurts the formation. So we're filtering it, we're separating out the oil, the solids. It's really a pre-treatment process for recycling. So our intention is to repurpose a lot of our facilities to just to bolt on some additional steps in the treatment process. And then we can keep that water at the surface and make your use of it.
So pre-treatment with like membranes or like RO process where you actually put everything out and redo it?
To get to a river discharge quality, the pilots that we've run, ultimately you do need RO at the end to polish it. Yeah, that's right. What we've tried to do is pick treatment processes based upon our various needs. Drilling needs a different quality than the completions team, the workover team. If we have an industrial user for cooling towers at a power plant, they may have a quality. And then if we're going to discharge to a stream, we have another quality. So trying to fit the purpose to the type of treatment method that we'll end up using.
Thank you.
One more question?
I'm just wondering about the industry. I mean, it seems like Occidental is doing the right thing. Is that across the board industry? Is that right? We're required to do that, or is this, can you talk more about the industry in general, just not break things here?
Sure. I will try to. There are a lot of initiatives to help us get even better in what we do. And that's through regulation, legislation, with air emissions, with water usage, particularly in Colorado, continuing to be responsible. And those efforts really have to be hand in hand with the industry stakeholders and the industry itself. Sometimes goals get way ahead of technology. Sometimes technology can be driven by some aggressive goals. And so it's working together to try to get to the same endpoints. And I would say that over the last several years, and due in part because of the industry, but even COVID and other things, we've seen more consolidation of companies. And the ones that really remain, I think, have the resources to partner with the communities, with the state, with the other agencies to try to make these advances together so that we can continue to work well in the expected environment that we do. Does that help?
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you.
If I could add on to that, just real quick, just in my work with oil and gas companies, number one, Anadarko was, in my opinion, a leader in the water on demand system because there really is no other company that has that type of infrastructure, but what that has led to is efficiencies in the industry to where you very rarely see water trucked to location anymore. So you see that middle top picture more than anything from some of these smaller companies that might be more remote or some of these conglomerates like Civitas you mentioned earlier. That's a recent conglomerate over the last couple of years of 5 smaller companies that have now been merged into one giant company. They don't have the infrastructure like the water on demand system, but Anadarko had the foresight to install a lot of it underground. So the delivery method, that has been a good technological advance over the last few years to where the trucks are now gone. The safety issues of all those trips back and forth are now gone, right? The potential for all those conflicts that we all know from increased traffic is gone. And the lay flat lines and the working with the property owners has been a good advancement to get water where it needs to go. But yet it's not to where Oxy is because nobody else put that infrastructure in the ground.
Keep pushing the industry. So I was in Firestone, guys come through there and you started laying down that pipe and reduce the truck traffic in that area like exponentially. So should counterparts do the same thing. We'd love to have that.
And a little selfish side note, before I came to the industry, I did some regional water planning for one of the local water utility companies. And this infrastructure is backbone of northern Colorado. So I'm excited because it's working really well for what we need now. And I'm excited to see what it'll, be able to help with the growing needs of the region in the future too.
Let's give a hand to Eric. And what we're actually gonna do, we're gonna grab lunch, because we're a little behind. Grab lunch, come back in here, and we'll hear from our next presenter. So do that as quickly as possible, and then we'll hear from our.
Eric will be virtual, so we'll be watching on the screen.
But thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you.
So you're gonna wait? Thank you.
Hey, Eric, did you get that quick email I just sent out? I don't know if you got it.
I'm sorry, are you okay? I don't think I have a long one on the side.
Eric, are you able to hear me?
Yep, I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Yes, awesome. And do you screen and run the presentation on your side?
Yeah, let me see if I can load it. Let me try this.
Yeah.
It's okay, no, I didn't know if you were doing that or if you were.
Can you see that?
Yes, we can. You might be looking at yourself a little bit for your presentation too, by the way. We're using a 360 camera, so it'll show this whole screen.
Got it. Let me tell me if you can hear this when I hit play.
But I mean, even.
And Eric, sorry that we're a little behind. Is it all right? Do you have a few minutes after the time that we intended on ending?
Yes. Yep. I do.
Okay, awesome. We wanted folks to grab lunch ahead of time so we wouldn't, squeeze your presentation. We want to give, you the full time.
Yep. No worries. Can you see that and hear that on your end?
Yep, I can.
And it's playing the video?
It is, yep.
Okay, perfect.
For years, he was like, wanted to run this every, and so they were really.
Awesome. So, we'll just go grab everybody real quick. Karen will give a quick introduction for you, who is our, the program, and then we'll get started. But I'm gonna hop up and, pull people back together for you.
Okay, no worries. Take your time.
Thank you.
Some of it is that there's a perception.
Now, Eric, you can hear us.
So, well, you have to be able to put it back on, that you're not making the new times. And very difficult.
And, yeah, you're good. Brewers also manufacturing the cat, so that will, maybe you hit a flat line, the system you have in place.
Yeah.
But you need to take that next step. Yeah.
I think the last people that asked you.
Because of the capital expenditure so much.
Yeah.
Okay, Eric Nielsen, I'm gonna introduce our next speaker. So he is the Associate General Counsel at Leprino Foods Company, one of the largest dairy products company in the world. Eric's work focuses on resolving complex environmental, land use, real estate, construction, and other related legal issues for Leprino. Prior to locating in Colorado in 2014, he worked as an attorney at the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency, clerked for justice on the Vermont Supreme Court, and spent 2 years in a boutique regulatory firm in Vermont. Eric has a BA from Rutgers in urban planning and public policy and a JD from Boston University School of Law. So thanks for being with us today, Eric, and apologies for being a little behind, but we're gonna open it up here for you. I'll make sure it's working.
No worries. Thanks. Thanks for having me. Can everybody hear me?
Yep, got it.
Great. I'm actually glad you guys grabbed lunch because I'm always a little nervous being the last thing standing between you and lunch. So glad you got some lunch. So I'm Eric Nielsen, Associate General Counsel at Leprino Foods Company. I've been at Leprino for about 7 years now. I originally started at Leprino as its first in-house environmental counsel, and that role has kind of morphed into I call myself a jack of all trades, master of none. Although environmental and water issues are definitely still a big part of that scope. So I'm excited to be back in front of this group. I think this is the third or fourth year that I've done this presentation with Water Literate Leaders, and it's been a pleasure every time. So let me go to the next slide here. So a little bit about Leprino Foods Company. I assume at least some of you are familiar with the company given our presence in Northern Colorado. Leprino is the largest mozzarella cheese company in the world. We're also the largest producer of lactose in the world and a leading producer of whey protein. We employ over 5,000 people worldwide at this point. We have 9 manufacturing facilities in the United States. We have 3 in California, 2 are in a city in the Central Valley called Lemoore. And then we have 1 a little further north, also in the Central Valley, in a little town called Tracy, just east of the Bay Area. We have obviously 2 facilities in Northern Colorado, 1 in Fort Morgan, 1 in Greeley. Our global headquarters are here in Denver. And then in addition to our corporate offices here in Denver, we have pretty large R&D facility, a pilot plant on both the cheese and the nutrition side, and a big laboratory operation here in Denver. South of Colorado, we've got a facility in Roswell, New Mexico. Just to the east, we have a facility, our newest facility under construction in Lubbock, Texas. That's coming online in late 2024, early 2025, and that facility will be about the size of our Greeley facility. Heading up Michigan, we've got a facility in Allendale and then a facility in Remus. And then that last most eastern dot, that's Waverly, New York. You'll notice it straddles the state line because the facility literally straddles the state line. The line between Pennsylvania and New York runs directly through the center of the facility, which makes for some interesting legal questions about where things happen within the facility, mostly from a labor and employment perspective. Internationally, so we sell products into well over 50 countries across the world. We have what I would call kind of a sales and marketing presence in Asia, Singapore, China, Japan, South Korea. And then we have manufacturing operations and sales operations in Latin America and Europe. Until 2023, we'd been part of a joint venture with a company called Glambia in the EU and the UK, about 50-50 partners. Glambia divested from its cheese assets in the EU and the UK, and we ended up buying out that JV last year. So now we are the sole owners of those operations in the EU and the UK. And then the Brazil operations are the result of an acquisition we made back in 2018. We purchased essentially a mozzarella cheese company down in Brazil, a company called Picnic. Brazil, for those that don't know, second to the US, Brazil is the second largest consumer of mozzarella cheese in the world. So good market to be in if you're in the mozzarella space. So transitioning to water, that's why we're here. So our operations, the raw ingredients that form the foundation for basically all the products that we manufacture. The raw ingredient, obviously, is milk. And when you're processing milk into products like cheese, whey protein, and lactose, you're really processing out a lot of the water component of that milk to be able to make those products. A really simplified explanation is you bring in the milk, you separate the curds and the whey, the curds go to make cheese, and the whey goes to make our nutrition products. What a lot of people don't realize is that 87% of milk is water. And we don't just separate out the water, dump it down the drain and forget about it. We've become what I would call very technically adept at essentially collecting that water, the water portion of the milk, storing it, and then using it and reusing it to the extent possible within our facilities to ultimately reduce the water needs that we require at our facilities, either from municipal sources or from wells or other sources. So in my tenure at Leprino, I've watched us become more and more progressive with reuse, more and more progressive and aggressive with collecting, storing, metering all that water that we pull out of the milk to be able to reuse it for cleaning and everything else that we do in the facilities. And that's kind of a novel aspect, I think, of working in the dairy industry, is the amount of water that you can pull from the milk for beneficial reuse. Ultimately, that water, at a certain point, you run out of storage because really, for example, you're taking in 8 million pounds of milk a day. So you run out of storage at some point, and that water ultimately will have to go out to our wastewater treatment facility where it's treated and then discharged at river quality into the cash polluter. So my next slide is a video with just a quick overview of our Greeley operations. And just yell at me if you can't hear it playing. Give me 1 second. Benton, I swear we just tested this and it worked.
Oh, we really did. I do have it up if you need me to pull it up. Oh, nice. There we go. And we have sound.
Headquartered in Denver, Colorado, today Leprino Foods is a world leader in the production of premium quality dairy foods and ingredients. We're the largest producer of mozzarella cheese in the world and a leading supplier of lactose and whey proteins. We have 9 U.S. manufacturing facilities, including 2 plants right here in Colorado. We employ 1,200 people in our state. One of the most technically advanced and environmentally friendly cheese and ingredient manufacturing facilities in the world. Let us show you how we do environmental leadership at the Leprino Foods Greeley plant. What is the lifeblood of the Rocky Mountain region? Having access to abundant, clean water is important to all neighbors, from farmers and ranchers to household enthusiasts and consumers. Protecting our water resources not only protects human health, but also protects the health of our ecosystem. Reducing our water is an important part of our overall sustainability goals. As we strive for continual improvement in our water usage practices, we look for projects to increase water efficiency. We realize resource conservation teams to educate and promote water savings. In Greeley, we're using innovative approaches to reduce our impact. For example, we rinse equipment with foam-based cleaners that require less water or use cleaning methods without water. Also look for creative ways to reduce municipal sources. Starting with the Nora plant. Milk is about 87% water. And we water at the end of the cheese making and whey processing stages as condensated whey, which we call cow water. After running it through a filtration sterilization system, we cow water by reusing it for cleaning purposes and throughout the plant. This unique reuse effort makes our plants net generators of water, meaning the water output from the facility exceeds the amount of fresh water we take in. And when we use the water factory again, it goes to our advanced wastewater treatment plant. The plant 100,000 gallons more water to the river than it takes in every day, which is 1,000 households. Being a good neighbor, we are quality water we treat and discharge for others to beneficially use. Almost all the water is returned to the catchment of the river to be used for agricultural, municipal, and recreational downstream treating. We have production associated vision of our farm space farm plant for increased wastewater. So in 2017, we installed an anaerobic digester and a cogeneration engine. The waste engine generates electricity and heat for use within our facility. The digester process is expected to generate 6 megawatts of power a day for use at the wastewater treatment plant, yielding an estimated $180,000 a year in electricity savings. The digester reduces residual salt by 40%, reducing our overall carbon footprint with fewer trucks burning fuel, along with the other infrastructure and noise impacts of trucking. I think this stewardship is essential to maintain sustainability. And it's success as well.
All right. So I usually use that video as a segue into this brief discussion on developed water doctrine in Colorado. Is anybody here familiar with the concept of developed water?
No.
No. Okay. Hearing some no's. So this is essentially the statutory definition. Lauda legally is. I've tried to summarize it below. In a nutshell, so if someone develops water from a non-traditional source in Colorado, the developer thereof has the right to use or sell that water, among other things, and can utilize natural water courses to transport that water. And one of the perfect examples of this is the cow water that Brian was discussing in that video, right? The water portion of the milk that we separate out during our processing activities is developed water. And so going back to 2017, 2016, we, along with the city of Greeley, engaged in a water court process to actually obtain an adjudicated water right associated with the developed water that we ultimately discharge into the Cache La Prud'e River. And that water right is solely associated with the developed portion of the water that we discharge into the river, right? The increment of water that comes out of the milk as part of our processing activities. And we actually license the use of that developed water back to the city of Greeley. Well, most of it is licensed back to the city of Greeley. And the city is able to, through an exchange in the river, actually able to utilize that portion of developed water for municipal purposes within the city of Greeley. But I'd like to talk about that here because it's kind of a novel concept. I have not heard of it being implemented in many other places. And it's really a great kind of circle of life story for both us and the municipality. And that's been a great partnership over the years. We are going down a similar path with our new facility in Lubbock. As some of you may be aware, West Texas is the Ogallala Aquifer underlies West Texas. Some people believe that the Ogallala Aquifer is not recharging at a rate that's fast enough to essentially support the West Texas communities and the growth in West Texas into the future. And so we actually are doing something very similar with the city of Lubbock, where the city is essentially going to secure a water right from us associated with the developed portion or the increment of water in the milk that we process in our facility. So the Greeley, our agreement with Greeley really formed part of the foundation for that arrangement in Lubbock, and it's a great story both here and in a state like Texas where water is going to become more and more scarce over time. I've just got a few slides left. I'll talk through some of the other things we're doing in our facilities with respect to water use and conservation. Water metering, it doesn't sound very exciting, but you know, one of the ways that you figure out how to conserve water is you figure out where your water is going. And our facility leadership has done a really good job across all of our facilities of installing more and more comprehensive systems of water metering to figure out where's the water going within the plant, which processes within the facilities are most water intensive, and then what can we do to modify those processes to reduce water use. And water meter, it really starts with water metering. That's what you need to do to understand what's going on in your facility and what you need to do to reduce water requirements within a large cheese manufacturing facility. Wastewater heat recovery. So we've implemented a few of these projects across the facilities. This one is at our Lemoore, California facility. The wastewater that comes out of our facilities before it hits the wastewater treatment plant is typically pretty hot. You know, we're doing all sorts of things to heat that water up. Either we're heating up the milk to essentially evaporate the water off, or you're superheating the water for your cleaning processes, things like that. And these wastewater heat recovery systems allow us to recover waste heat from the water. And then we use that waste heat to actually heat water, incoming water, either from municipal or well water sources. And it reduces our energy consumption. And this was, I mean, it looks complicated. It's actually a relatively simple system, and the return. This has been a great project for us. These have all been great projects for us. In this particular example, our return on investment was just a year because of the energy savings associated with using waste heat to heat incoming water. So, good example of that. And then this is what I call the water cycle. This is a picture, an aerial view of our Roswell, New Mexico facility. The facility is kind of in the bottom portion of the frame, and then you notice quite a bit of farmland around that facility. So not all of our facilities have easy or feasible access to a river for us to be able to discharge water to the river for beneficial reuse in the river. In some cases, like in Roswell, we have a wastewater treatment facility on site, and then we will have a farm adjacent to or nearby the facility. And then we typically contract with a contract farmer who essentially takes all of our treated effluent, applies it on farmland, and then grows crops. And in this case, in Roswell, most of the crops that are grown here are actually grown to then be used within the dairy industry. So it's kind of cycle of life. You're getting a ton of water out of the milk that's coming in, and that very same water that you took out of the milk is going back into the ground to grow crops for the very farmers that sold you milk in the first place. So this is in Roswell. This is a 400-acre farm. We recently started doing an operation just like this in California, and that's a 2,500-acre operation. And we have a 6-mile pipeline that actually pipes the treated effluent up to that farm operation. And that's gotten more and more complex, so that, yes, a lot of those crops are going to dairy farms, but through crop rotation and other agricultural mechanisms, we're actually able to grow, in some cases, tomatoes and cotton and other more high value crops. Just depends on what our contract farmers able to do in a given year. So kind of a great cycle of life story, just based on our treated wastewater. And then my last two slides, I'll touch on this concept of zero water. So at some point, and we're not sure exactly where it's going to be yet, but at some point we have a goal to get to zero water at one or more of our facilities. And so right now, this kind of shows you the current state of things, right? Plant operations in the middle. The water supply, our typical sources of water supply are the raw water coming into the plant, either from municipal or well water source. And then you've got, obviously, as I mentioned, the water that comes out of milk. It goes through our plant. We use it and reuse it, as I mentioned, as much as we possibly can. And then at the end of the day, it's treated and discharged for beneficial use, either on a farm or discharged into a river. The zero water concept, if the slide loads properly. So the zero water concept would eliminate the raw or municipal well water aspect of the supply and allow us to essentially just utilize water from milk within our plant operations. And there are a few things holding us up from fully implementing that today. There are lots of regulations in place from both USDA and FDA, and even down at the state level that prevent us from just utilizing water from milk. There's something called the pasteurized milk ordinance, which basically designates the water source or the quality of water that you have to utilize in your facility. We have started down the regulatory path in California. We have what I would call initial approval to start kind of testing this process. And what this would allow us to do is essentially eliminate or substantially reduce the amount of municipal water you're taking into your plant, allow you to essentially start with water from milk, have it leave the plant, go out to a more complex treatment process, obviously, than it's being treated to today. There would very likely be an RO stream coming off that treatment process. And then you'd bring that water back into your facility and reuse it as much as you can, and then kind of keeps going in cycles. Eventually, you'd have so much water coming out of the milk that some of it would have to be discharged for beneficial use or reuse. But at the end of the day, if you could get here, and we think we can eventually, we could substantially reduce our reliance on water sources outside of simply pulling water from milk. So that's it's been on the horizon for a number of years, and we're always looking at opportunities to implement that. That's my last slide. I'm happy to take any questions you guys have.
Thanks, Eric. Just a quick question regarding your Greeley plant specifically. Since there's a whole bunch of dairies in and around the Weld County area, how much of your input of milk comes from the Weld County area?
The typical rule of thumb is almost all of our milk comes from within 50 miles of the plant. And I would venture to guess at our Greeley facility, I would venture to guess it's even narrower than that. And I've looked at a map before, and I'm pretty sure the majority comes from Weld County or Morgan County. And going back to when we developed the Greeley facility was, I think it first came online in 2011. The number that's been thrown at me over the years is 80 times, 80x. So since we've built that Greeley facility, the number of dairy cows, milking cows in Colorado has increased by 80 times what it was before the Greeley facility was constructed. And that's just based on sheer demand for milk at the facility. We're taking in 8 to 9 million pounds of milk every day at Greeley.
That's a lot of water.
Yeah.
A lot of cheese.
Eric, do you guys focus on water reuse in your like Wisconsin and New York facilities as much as you do like your Colorado, New Mexico, and Texas facilities?
Do you mean reuse from the cow water, the water component of milk, or all?
You know, it is, how you guys discharge for beneficial use, how you guys take it from cows, and all these different things that you guys, kind of tout and work on, these water sensitive states. Is it a company wide thing that you do it in areas that have a surplus of water, or do you have different focuses of efficiency out there?
No, I'd say that we're pretty consistent across the board, across the country with respect to water conservation, similar to energy conservation and overall sustainability as an organization. We're not just focused on it in Colorado, New Mexico, Texas, and California because of scarce water demands. We're focused on it because we want to be a good environmental steward. And I think we do a pretty good, pretty consistent job across the country of conserving water resources.
Any questions?
I would make it as someone had fun. Okay, the process by which you came to, I don't know if it was more of an enlightenment or if you guys came into the deal with the idea of bringing extra water that you really can use. Or if it was just something that organically happened when you found out what the cost of water in Colorado was, like a lot of times happens. And sometimes you try to figure out how to get it down by trade-offs and benefits, and these kinds of things. So I didn't know if that's something that happened when you moved into Greeley, and you probably might not even know. But I just want to know how that happened, because we look for opportunities all the time, but they don't always slap you in the face. And so this is a really interesting opportunity that it seems like it could have applications in a lot of different places.
Yeah, it's a good question. The architect of that deal with Greeley from the Loprino perspective was really my boss, sits next to me right now. A guy named John Albee, who's now our general counsel, and he's always been a really, really solid water lawyer. He actually started the water law review at the University of Denver Law School. And so he's always had kind of different angles, different perspectives on water for the company. And he coordinated going back to 2011, he was coordinating with our water lawyer who's now retired, a guy named Barney White, and kind of came up with this novel idea. And yes, is there a financial component to it? Absolutely. But it's also, from our perspective, it's a good steward. It's a good use, good stewardship, and a good use of that water, and it allows the municipality to take advantage of a scarce resource in the state. So hard to say exactly what, was it the chicken or the egg, but I suspect it was both, right? You're thinking of it in terms of both a financial resource, and you're thinking of it both in terms of a scarce resource here in Colorado that is, honestly, it ends up being a great story for everybody all around.
All right, well, thank you so much, Eric. We appreciate your time.
Thank you all for having me, and yeah, Benton, feel free to share my email address if anybody has any questions, follow-up questions. Feel free to share my email address and reach out to me with any follow-ups you have.
Eric, thanks so much. Appreciate it.
Thank you all. Have a good afternoon.
A good one.
Right, so we are going to transition on to our last speaker before book club presentation. So I'd like to welcome Diane Lee. She is the Director of Sustainable Food and Water Programs at the Nature Conservancy in Colorado. She leads their Thriving Rivers and Sustainable Water Supply Strategy in Colorado. The Nature Conservancy is a global environmental nonprofit working to create a world where people and nature can thrive. In that capacity, she works with partners to create